Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to another Group Up podcast. This is going to be a real special and unique type one because it's going to be a little bit more informal, a little bit more chat heavy, which includes you guys. And also, we've got Torb with us, so that always mixes things up. And another unusual part of it is that we have one guest who will join us in a little bit. So Freedo's running a little bit late, and thus he's just a blank mystery PNG right now. But he will arrive soon enough and will join us. So with me, as always, is some awesome guests. Beneath right now on screen is Andy GMB. Andy, how you doing?
Hey, doing good, doing good. Hard work pays off, etc., etc.
And the real inspiration behind this meeting as well, and who will kind of take a lot of leads on this one and make my job easier, is Jayne. So what's up, Jayne?
I thought that this was the beard judging contest. No?
I
Okay.
mean,
Freedo better be showing up to
Freedo
compete
better.
once he gets here.
No, Freedo's
all
gonna
I'm
come
saying.
completely clean. He's gonna come completely clean. Just lose.
Yeah. You know, it's not very often that I succumb to beard envy over here, but Andy crushing it. So.
I mean, the whole ocean is congregating towards his beard, so there's no real competition there. But okay, so guys, we're gonna kind of start off and just talk generally about content creation. I'm gonna throw it over to Jayne, because Jayne is kind of the real brains behind this one. He kind of just wanted to have a chat about content creation because it's in such an interesting place right now, and we're going to be looking with a view towards Overwatch 2 as well, particularly, and how that might affect content creation. But right now, Jayne, got a lot of thoughts on content creation itself as it stands.
Yeah, so last week we did was it last week or the week before that we did the support
I think it was last week.
Last week with Awkward and ML7. And I think that during that debate, we talked about supports for maybe 20 minutes of the whole 2 hours, and that's probably being a little bit generous. So that conversation last week got into a lot of stuff about the path to pro, a lot of stuff just about the community in general, and even some about content creation for both people looking to go pro and content creators like ML7 and myself. And I thought that there was really a lot left on the table. And last week we kept trying to kind of pull away from that conversation and go back to what was intended, the conversation about supports, which never really happened except for the token effort. So last week I sent SVB a message. I was like, hey, we should just do a podcast specifically about content creation and the Overwatch community. And I think that there's kind of two main themes that we'll use to kind of launch off this podcast. The first one being that everyone knows that we're coming up to Overwatch 2. So there's some things to talk about, kind of like what is the state of the community right now? Is it being sustained off of the promises of Overwatch 2? Would it be dead without kind of us knowing that Overwatch 2 exists? And then beyond all the doom and gloom of the now, what are our kind of hopes and aspirations? What do we hope that Overwatch 2 will actually do to content creation and the community as a whole going forward, especially if they start introducing more PvE stuff, like a campaign or raids or something along the lines of something you might find in World of Warcraft. And then on top of that, I think that one of the cool things that we have here is we have a wide variety of individuals who kind of, I would say, each are content creators, but have their own little domain. So, Andy, I'm not sure if a lot of people would consider a content creator, but I certainly do with all the things he's doing, but maybe a bit of a non-traditional one. So the underlying question to that exploration is going to be basically that Overwatch has just revealed that the game has 10 million active monthly members. And my question is, where are they? What communities are they in? Or are they in anything that you would call a community within Overwatch?
Thank you very much for that eloquent intro, Jayne. And I'm going to throw this over to Andy because I know Andy has some thoughts on this. Andy, where are these 10 million at?
Well, you were saying earlier, Jayne, before the podcast started, about how a lot of the content creators are Twitch people, and like a lot of the communities sort of go around that. I think we kind of forget that the Twitch people are the loudest voice in the room a lot of the time, and these communities, like these 10 million people, yeah, they sit back and watch. But I'd say, I mean, I know on Reddit, for example, it's something like 90% of people don't vote, don't comment, don't do anything, and
Yeah.
then like 10% of people, maybe even less, even comment or vote or anything like that. So it's like most people don't engage. Most people just enjoy the game and play it, and don't get angry at Brigitte on Twitter. Not calling out anyone there specifically.
No one at all.
Could be anyone. Could be anyone.
Could be anyone.
But really, most
if
people
you're
are
watching,
just enjoying the game.
hello.
But no, I think most people are just enjoying the game, and also one of the things to consider is like we're all English speaking, or English, Irish, uh, whatever languages you guys know, and like there's a lot of people that are in other countries, China, Korea, elsewhere that we don't get to interact with it at all. I've been trying to move over to not move over, but like interact with the Bilibili community a bit more, which is like Chinese YouTube, and they are super active. Like it's crazy how there's these huge communities that we just never get to see, and they have all their own content creators. They have all their own, you know, types of content. There's a load of workshop stuff actually on Bilibili that you just don't get to see. Like they're super creative when it comes to workshops. So it's like I think there's too many people. They're there obviously, but just they're not speaking up, and we're not seeing them.
Hmm.
It's just not easy to see them. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
I guess
there's so much. Go ahead, go Jay.
I was just saying, I guess that is an interesting one because, with the communities, I was thinking about kind of communities being more segregated or distant based off of kind of activity, whereas maybe the
Mm,
lore community or the art community or hell, the fanfic community, they might not interact with like the competitive community nearly as much, which would be expected. But I kind
Oh,
of forgot about that whole thing about Overwatch is absolutely massive in Asia, especially China, and not just
I
with the
mean, I
casuals,
think
but the competitive side as well.
I think the competitive community thinks it's way bigger than it actually is. I think most
Yes.
people who play Overwatch just get on, play quick play, play arcade, whatever, mystery heroes, and that's it. Like they don't get into, oh, what's my rank or, super try hardy stuff. They just play the game and enjoy it. That's unfortunately, you know, because I think most people who are in the competitive community imagine that everyone is sweating their ass off to get their highest rank, and this minor change to a hero, this really matters to everyone in the community, and they just lose foresight of
Yeah.
what the reality of the game actually is.
It was one of the things that actually got mentioned during season 2 of the Overwatch League. I remember that,
Mm.
people were trying to basically that Reddit provided a distorted picture of kind
Oh,
of the
absolutely.
competitive scene, and the fact that there was some statistic that they pulled out where it was like 99% of people who watch the Overwatch League, let alone comment, don't even read the competitive Overwatch Reddit. Whereas you see that like that is the largest hub for the discussion of the
Hmm.
game by far, and it's still
Mhm.
1% of the people who actually watch and engage with competitive Overwatch of some variety, whether it's YouTube, Twitch, the contenders website, or anything like that. So it really is truly kind of the most hardcore, the most zealot fans that exist on those communities. And they do kind of paint themselves, or at least manage to convince themselves that they are the community, they are the majority, where it's amazing how tiny of a percentage it really is.
Well, it's just because people aren't engaging. It's like, yeah, there's the Reddit community, and they are big, but I think the reason they have that perception is because there is no other, as far as I know, there's no other similarly sized competitive Overwatch community at least in the English speaking world. Like I don't know
Hmm.
for other communities.
Yeah,
So I can understand why the perception happened, but I think people could use a bit of humble pie when it comes to the importance of their opinions as to what the direction of the game should be. Um,
yeah. There's already so much to unpack here because not only are we talking like regional differences and stuff, but this is something that really comes to light when you make content on multiple platforms. So
mm,
so for me, as someone who started off as a YouTube content creator, I started off and I was like, there was channels that I knew, that were the big channels, Jayne's being one of them, Freedo's being one of them, Your Overwatch, and people like Stylos and stuff, and where you're like, okay, these are the big YouTube content creators, and I started making YouTube content, and then I built what I would call a name for myself. I put this in heavy quotation marks, um, and then you think you reach this point where you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm somebody in the Overwatch community now. And you start making content on Twitch and you realize there's a whole separate community and there's a whole separate perception of the community within Twitch as well, where it's like, no, these are the big content creators, and like you're now the small fish, and you're stepping into this tiny pond. And then again, you'll go to like Twitter, and then there's a whole nother bubble of content creation there, where there's like a Twitter community where certain people are considered relevant and their opinions are considered the important. And then
Yes.
again, but again, you go back to YouTube, and like for example, I'll collaborate with some content creators that I think are really massive, and I think by certain sections of the community, like we said, like depends on what you define as the community, but certain sections of the community be like, yeah, this is a massive name in Overwatch, and then I'll put it on YouTube, and like my YouTubers will be like, who's this new person you've introduced us to SVB? Like, thanks for shouting out like, "Who's Jayne?" Like, thanks for shouting out Jayne. Oh, no, that's a facetious example because Jayne is like far bigger than me in YouTube. But like, you know, there's streamers who are like triple, quadruple my Twitch viewership, and then it's like you go to YouTube and because they don't have a YouTube channel, nobody knows who they are, or
Yeah,
you know, certain sections of YouTube don't know who they are.
And I think this is kind of, I wanted to kind of just share a little bit of an anecdote because when I first started streaming, this was really early on. It was like I want to say, I don't know when it was, but it was really early on. At that point in time, the only people who were popular on Twitch for playing the game were people who were the best at one specific hero. It was like the one trick parade, right? If you wanted to, and I guess this was with people want to learn the game. They're like, I'm going to learn Widow. And then they go and find, you know, the best Widowmaker streamer or something like that.
Kefri.
So like Kefri or like whoever it was back then. And that's kind of where you see some of the older big names where like, you know, Shatter is still existing, or you know, you had some of the people who were kind of comedians. I think that like Surefour and Mendo, but Surefour was still, you know, primarily Hitscan, and Mendo back then was doing a lot of Genji. But that's really kind of what it was, is that you had to be like either a really high level pro or a hero one trick, and there was nobody else in those sections who were popular for really anything, nothing casual, nothing educational. And then like people started trying to convince me to stream doing kind of like coaching and educational stuff, and I was absolutely convinced that it was just a stupid idea. Nobody would watch it. Like, look at the section. Nobody wants, you know, educational or coaching content, right? If they wanted it, obviously it would be there. You know, the market supplies supply creates supply for demand, sort of thing. And then, you know, once I started actually coaching and doing that kind of educational content, it's like there was this demand for it, and my channel blew up. So it makes me kind of wonder if there are these casual players out there who are playing quick play, who are playing arcade, who are doing all of these different things within the community, who maybe just don't have a community or a creator to, you know, gather around, flock to, congregate with, whatever kind of words you want there. So, you know, maybe it is the side of, or maybe it's the fault of kind of people within the community, you know, not being imaginative enough, or maybe just not providing a place for these communities to actually start forming and growing. Because obviously the desire was there in the community for some sort of educational and coaching content, and I just kind of lucked into that role first. So,
Of course, the contradiction that is if they're casual, they may not be interested in actually engaging any more deeply than they do engage, and they may not actually be super interested in watching a lot of content.
Like, I think that was one of the reasons for my success, though, and one of the things that got me so heavily criticized is because I tried to not teach at the professional level, and I've said this I don't know how many times, but like coaching at the professional, even the top 500 level, is really boring and kind of tedious, and it doesn't make for great content, right? And so I always tried to aim my content specifically for that like gold to diamond range, because that's the vast majority of that bell curve. And even then, instead of trying to do this better, it's like, you know, you need to your aiming technique, or your like I would usually just pick kind of one thing and make it around kind of a lesson that was shared in context, or, you know, work with the individual, something that was kind of personal to them. And, you know, that made it kind of a lot more casual, accessible, a lot more relatable to people. So it was kind of like the actual coaching stuff, you know, I did professional stuff, but the content that I make for YouTube and stuff is like geared entirely differently. And I would almost say that even though I am in kind of that coaching, competitive educational space, my content has always tried to gear itself a little bit more towards casuals, and maybe that's one of the reasons for its success. I certainly think so.
Well, it's like you said, that's where the bell curve is. Like, that's where the center of the bell curve is. There's only 500 top 500s, you know, like there's only
Yeah.
so many people that are going to be interested in that sort of high level content. Like, yeah, you can watch high level content if you're, you know, gold or plat or whatever, but it has no relevance to you really. Oh, there's Mr. Freedo there.
He has
I've got
joined
this
us.
ready. I've
Oh,
got this ready. Oh, and he's left us, so now he's the
Oh
debated.
God! Oh
Oh, he's
God!
back. Oh, we're back.
oh God,
There we
Jayne
go.
is
I'm in two
Freedo
places at
and
once.
Jayne.
What's up,
Hi,
Fredo?
everybody.
Hey,
How you doing? So we
All
are
right.
talking. So we're talking all things content creation, and right now we've already gone deep, as we always do, Fredo. So we've been talking the idea of like kind of the separation of communities. You know, we started off discussing the 10 million users that Overwatch declared it had, but you know, why do we seem to have difficulty perceiving them? So one reason Andy posited was well, there's a huge geographical separation. You know, there's a huge Bilibili I always get it wrong. Chinese community playing. You know, there's regional separations in that way, but of course platform as well, like Twitch, Reddit, YouTube. You know, people are of different, you know, they're often completely different communities. And just now Jayne has brought up the idea of there's a lot of casual players in the community, and we not engaging with them enough because we don't seem to necessarily see them and hear them as much as we hear from, for example, our competitive Overwatch community, who seem to, you know, it feels often like they are the voice of, let's say, professional Overwatch, certainly. So
I mean, not to me, but professional Overwatch maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if they are a voice at all. I mean, there's like 10 of them. So if you want to focus in on like words on a screen, this goes into a whole nother spiel I could go into. But
go nuts.
Reading.
Right
go.
I mean, people who leave comments at all on anything are like 1%. So
yeah, exactly.
Reading things people write is almost useless anyway. And then a subreddit. I mean, like, then you're so far removed from the core player base. But another thing that I don't know if you guys said or not is that there's multiple platforms for one, and the relationship I think the Overwatch players have to the game they play is just kind of different to other games, and it's kind of interesting to me. Whereas a casual COD fan is almost like more hardcore into COD than a casual Overwatch fan is into Overwatch. That's kind of a dense statement, but like COD viewers
elaborate.
Are like really, how do I describe it? I guess like engaged is maybe the best word, where and this almost echoes to their esport being more successful, quote unquote, despite it being kind of a hilariously much more simple game. But it relates. Everybody relates with all of the COD stuff, and it's like a uniform template. Whereas Overwatch is just like means so many different things to so many different people, right? And there's so many different sub communities in them. I can go into depth on that, but I can see Jayne has something to say.
Yeah, so I think that I might have a word that could help us kind of describe this, because I've been talking to my fiance. Obviously, I do that daily, but but she is trying to become a writer, a fiction writer, and she's been trying to go through this process of looking for communities where she can be with like-minded people actually trying to write books. And one of the things that she's described is she keeps finding writing adjacent communities, kind of people who build their identity around writing, you know, writing books, manuscripts, novels, you know, like someday I'm going to write a book sort of thing, but don't really have any kind of serious effort towards actually making that goal a reality. And so she's been calling them kind of writing adjacent communities. And I wonder if that's applicable here, where, you know, Overwatch, with all of its, you know, the lore, the inclusiveness, the art, how much fun it really is as a casual game, especially when you're together with friends or something. You know, it could be a game where there are like the community of people who play Overwatch. More of them could basically be adjacent to it, rather than COD people who might be more actually playing the game, actually engaged, active in, you know, actually logging into it day after day, sort of thing.
And with sorry, I muted myself. I don't know if I'm talking over somebody, and COD is a much easier game to play casually as well. Like Overwatch, it's so fun casually, but there's like always this weird limbo state where it's hard to hide from how hardcore of a game it is. Even, I mean, I think quick play is the best way to play. I've gone at great length to describe that. But even then, like Call of Duty, you can play, you know, hammered. However, there's a lot of complaints about the new one, where the skill-based matchmaking is so severe that maybe that's kind of going away. But at least like that's their expectation, right? Whereas Overwatch, I feel like the game is always trying to pull you in a hardcore direction just based on like how it's designed. But you see what I'm saying? So it's like a game you can love, but it's difficult to play for a lot of people, because to get more out of it, I think you do have to dedicate. So it's always doing this dance where, like, I don't know, it's Schrodinger's competitive video game where it like it can't be one thing or the other. Whereas COD is so like distinctly one thing, and then the esports side of it is like almost distinctly another thing, basically. And they have a better separation, which is kind of what I would wish Overwatch could have. There's obvious reasons why they don't do that. StarCraft maybe being one of them, but anyway, that's that.
I'm kind of interested in what Andy has to say on that, actually.
I was gonna ask Andy myself, so Andy.
Well, I'd like to say that, you know, you can play Overwatch pretty pissed as well. Listen, I got platinum after a bottle of whiskey, and there are clips to prove it. So It's doable. It's
Are you
absolutely
playing
doable.
Torb though? Are you
I,
just a Torb
I
one trick? Because
I
that
think I
I
was
could
playing
see that.
Anna. I think I was actually playing Anna. Yeah. There's a clip of me, and like you can see the lag in my brain as I shoot the shot, and the person is like 2 meters away, but still got platinum with it.
I mean, it's
Um,
not the most uncommon story in the world for somebody to be under the influence of some variety and playing or achieve GM top 500. I mean, there's people like that too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead, Andy.
No, no. Like I'm not really sure because to be honest, I've kind of dropped off in following the competitive, like the Overwatch League scene with Overwatch. Like it's just the there's so many reasons why that's happened for me. It's like the player stories have kind of gotten all muddled. Like teams have gotten so, you know, is there a team other than San Francisco Shock, and even
Generic.
them that has a long-lasting roster? Like I don't know who's kept a roster for more than like a season or so. So for me as a fan, it's really hard to follow. So I'm not really sure. Like the separation you're saying with Call of Duty between the casual and the competitive, like the pro scene. What do you mean by that? Like what's where is that separation that doesn't exist in Overwatch? Why do you think it doesn't exist in Overwatch but it does in COD?
What's a different rule set? They ban half the stuff. So
Okay. So the game
there you
itself is
go.
just like completely different. Like it's not a community thing. It's a
I mean, it's changed over the
gameplay.
years. I haven't
Yeah.
followed it closely, but I mean, traditionally, like for example, early on, I mean, like this goes back to Hastro, and Jayne obviously has a closer relationship to him than I do. But I followed him back then when he was a pro. Like that's how
Mhm.
far back like my knowledge of it goes. But back then, I mean, they pretty much use two guns, and there's no score streaks or kill streaks or whatever. Like the famous thing about the game, they took out because they're like, oh, that's not very competitive. So like automatically, just from the start of it, when they were attempting to make it more of an esport from the grassroots community, it was already a completely different rule set just based on like it wouldn't have worked otherwise. Then as the game went on, the devs were like, oh, this is kind of cool, and we're going to try to integrate some of this more into the game, but it was still like limited and had different rules. And there's a lot of items in Call of Duty that would you just don't want to see competitively, right? Like I don't know because I don't watch it regularly enough. Like if there's a championship on or something, maybe I'll watch it. But like it would be competitive to like everyone have claymores or motion sensors or whatever it is, right? Like they take a lot of that stuff out is the point that like
Mhm.
reduces the straight up gunplay. They leave some of it in for the explosions and excitement of it, but I don't know what the
Yeah,
current rule set is, but it's always different is the point.
I remember this being an issue though back in I don't know what season it was of Overwatch League where we were like a good couple of patches ahead of the Overwatch League and the
Mm.
community was pretty upset about that. So like I don't know, the Overwatch player base or the community base or again like the loudest people in the community, the competitive Overwatch subreddit, that sort of people, they seem to want the game to be the same as the competitive one. Like they want to see the pros play the same game that they're playing. Um,
well, it's interesting because I have a couple thoughts on this because there's a couple different things that we could go, but one
mhm,
element of it I think might be the self-identification. Speaking from like a personal perspective, when I was in school, and those were the days before electricity was invented, but when I was in school, like
Back in my
kids
day.
used yeah, like everybody played COD. Like it was like I think around Modern Warfare like 1, and every kid like had an Xbox or PlayStation and they were playing COD. And it wasn't really, there was nothing about the esports of it. It was just like you go home and you play COD, and that's like that's the thing a teenage guy does. Whereas and partly what Frida was speaking to there might speak of the specific separation of the esports versus the regular game, where clearly the COD developers, or whoever manages the esports section, has said, okay, well the game COD is the game COD, but when we're playing it as an esport, we'll play it like this. Whereas as we kind of alluded to in the great support debate, that separation is a lot more blurred in Overwatch, where it's like you play quick play, but the game is kind of leading you, it's kind of trying to guide you, like, okay, you like quick play, maybe you want to try comp now with people who are like a team, quote unquote. They promise you that is a team. Of course, they don't know the lies that's masking, but and then you get into competitive, and it's like, okay, you got to gold. Now, why don't you try to get to platinum and get to diamond and get to master and get to GM and then get to open division and then get to the contenders and then get to Overwatch League. So it's like every aspect of the game seems to be trying to guide you. Like that's the whole idea of the path to pro, right? Every
Mhm.
aspect of the game is supposed to be trying to guide you to go to the esports and to go to the pinnacle, which is Overwatch League. And yet, as we all kind of know ourselves through experience, it doesn't play out that way at all. Like the quick play is wildly separate to rank, and every rank itself is wildly separate to each other. And the fact that there is no rule set separation, the fact that it is all basically the same game, it kind of all muddies the waters. Whereas, yeah, as we kind of spoke about with COD, there's that separation. But again, to finish the self-identification point in Overwatch, I feel like you can... I know so many people who just like the art and lore and the character of Overwatch. Like, that's it. They don't have any interest in the game, per se. And if they played, it's a very perfunctory play. But they're like, yeah, I like Overwatch. Yeah, I like D.Va. She looks cool. And that's kind of it, where you can have that passive an interest in Overwatch. But nobody's watching COD because they're like, I really like that Russian guy in COD. I really relate to him. I really want to dress like him. Joe?
Yeah, I have quite a few points on this. In Jayne's absence, I will fill this void. I think he's coming back. I think also an interesting thing to me on that exact point is that the way Overwatch struggles as a streaming game. Now, there are streamers that are very successful streaming it, and I can maybe get into why that is. But in comparison to a game like Hearthstone, which the health of it goes up and down, I think it's actually at a high point now with like the 2 new game modes. I've actually been getting into it recently, but even when it was weak, it was still a great streaming game for a whole host of reasons. Whereas the Overwatch community, and this is sort of partially why I've been attempting to push quick play so hard to do my part, so to speak. But I feel most players that in line want that ranked experience, but when they go to a Twitch stream and they watch a player wait for 10 to 20 minutes to get a trash experience, like you can just see how, I mean, we've talked about this so many times, but like, I feel like watching Tim the Tapman's descent away from Overwatch just creates a great arc of the entire player base of gamers and their attitude towards why would I do this again? And I had this thought to myself yesterday, trying to go back in to play tank again. The narrative arc of my tank journey has now gone full circle through this podcast. We've talked about it a couple times, but trying to play tank again, I'm like, why would I ever play tank for randoms ever again? Why would I do this? Because like if I play quick play for a couple weeks since then, the last season, haven't played ranked at all, and I'm like, I can have fun on every character, play every role, and have a great time, and feel like you know the games aren't always close, or we might have a bad pick or whatever, and then there's no consequence. I just feel the format of Overwatch as a game hasn't promised or hasn't fulfilled the promise of what players' expectations are to hold that competitive player base, which is just a massive missed opportunity. Which is why we're excited for Overwatch 2, because I'm like, if they're not addressing that, they ain't doing their jobs, okay? Because if I could see that being a moron, they should be like, how do we do 100 things to fix this? Because if you don't fix that, how are you going to get anybody to watch the Overwatch League? How are they going to watch it on Twitch? It feels almost like it's done everything to try to push those players away and say, oh, no, you can't have a scoreboard. You can't have Now, again, they're fixing a lot of these things with Overwatch 2, so let me calm my anger slightly. But it just felt like so far with the game's life, it's like, it's almost as if they wanted ranked to be quick play plus, which is why I try to refrain from complaining too much, because I feel for the scope of this game, this is the system they wanted. Now, we'll see how those gears turn to readdress all these issues, because, like, I mean, you look to a game like Fortnite and it has an eSports scene, but it's a joke, but like people would rather watch that than watch an Overwatch streamer just like bang their head against the wall to no avail. And it takes almost like you have to be this perfect Overwatch streamer, great at the game, but also has a great personality. Like Emong is like just this guy who, Apex, and even he started to lose a bit of sanity. You could see it over the years. When I met Emong, he was the happiest, nicest guy ever. And now he's still that, but like with a tinge of sarcasm all the time. And that's the best we could get after we've beaten this poor man down with a pretty much meaningless rank system for 4 years. Okay, I've talked a lot.
Emong is like a metaphor for like the best of us, just like slowly deteriorating. Yeah. He's like Batman, where he's like reflects the city he's in, and now he's like gotten darker and Dark Knight.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
Well, am I going? Am I going up to bat on this one?
Yeah,
I think that
so.
it's a great point. I mean, I definitely related to the thing about tank. In order to make this, because this is one of the weird things about my content, is that at the kind of peak of my content, I had done all of the grinding to get good at the game. before I started streaming. And then when I started streaming, none of my content was actually playing the game. And when I actually play the game, I'm like hyper focused and there's zero interaction. So I'm not the kind of person who's a good streamer when they're actually playing the game. And that was before I took quite a long break. Like I was gone from the game completely for 8 months. Like I didn't play competitive for 8 months. Then before that, I was in the Overwatch League, so I was doing more coaching than playing. So I came back rusty as all hell, and I was like, all right, well, in order to get back into it, I'm gonna grind back up. I'm gonna get better at these heroes. I've got to learn the heroes like ball that got released while I was gone from the game. And like it was a slog, and I hated it. And the games were fun. It was like, it was really tough for me because I'm playing these. I don't have the specific drive to reach top 500 or grandmaster. Like that's not a goal that I have. The pursuit of that goal isn't a necessarily interesting one for me. So it's really hard to be excited and looking forward to doing that. And that was kind of before the experience is a little bit nah. But even then, it's like the purpose of doing that is so that I could teach and help others to do the same sort of thing. But it's like, why do I want to teach other people and help other people and encourage other people to go through this like soul sucking journey and experience? And you see the same sort of thing with a lot of the Twitch streamers. It's like you point out with Emong. Emong is every day. He streams for very long periods of time. But most other Twitch streamers, they take pretty consistent breaks. Like you've seen quite a few streamers within the community playing Pokemon recently. In Genshin Impact, a few people tried that. It's almost like they're trying to recharge their batteries so that they can hold their breath and dive back into playing Overwatch for long periods of time. Because, like, for whatever reason, it still does get a pretty sizable viewership. And as a Twitch streamer within the Overwatch community, I think that most people will sit at like 20 to 30% of their viewership if they do anything other than Overwatch. So it's like, especially with Overwatch 2 coming out, even if they did kind of want to pivot away and do something like, they're not the, they're not the Tim the Tatmans of the world, where there is a kind of certain streamer who has an audience that is more kind of accepting of variety. And for the vast majority of people, that's not the case. They're known for doing one thing. For example, my draw being primarily coaching and educational content within Overwatch. People who watch me for that have no reason to watch me when I do anything else because I'm not an expert in that game, for example. So that was kind of just a tangent. I didn't have an arrow to go with. So yeah, I got lost. Who wants to pick it up?
Well, I mean, you're kind of talking about like why like because could that all stem from how it gets soul sucking to play ladder, right? That's why streamers have had to divert and pivot to other games just to kind of keep their sanity. So again, is that just the aspect of Overwatch not delivering on what the game is supposed to be?
Well, I would say what a normal ranked experience would be, I guess. I mean, like people know League of Legends is not a great ranked experience, but I'd argue a MOBA game, like at least you can play in more individually, whereas in Overwatch, so much just about like your spacing. There's a long list of like guide videos I've been working on, and one of them's on spacing. I feel it's something that's like sometimes not mattered because the balance of the game was, well, just pick better stuff and you'd win. But when the game gets better balanced, then we can focus on actual gameplay, and like spacing is one of them. Since that's so much of your skill set as a player, but that's in relationship to your team, right? So you can focus on it, but at the same time, a teammate can throw off what the correct decision for you is all the time. And that's what I'm basically circling around is the fundamental reason why this game feels so poor to play with random players. That's just my opinion, because it's unlike MOBAs where I can go off my own and farm and do my own thing. And then we try to have a team fight. Overwatch is the exact opposite, where it's like almost always a team fight, or the structure of the engagement has to work for the whole game to work. Then you have a bad hero or a bad matchup or a bad whatever. The game logic means you're supposed to get blown out in a lot of these cases, but that doesn't feel good if you're like, well, I've got 3 teammates that are all picking the wrong heroes for the situation. What do I do, right? And then this is where we get into the wild west of ranked.
Well, I was going to add to that as well. Is like one thing we this is something we touched on in the Great Support Debate, is that the separation of like what a role is supposed to do in MOBAs is also a lot clearer. Like everybody knows, like, okay, well, you pick one carry hero, I'll pick like 2 supports, you pick a tank, I'll pick like a mid laner or whatever. And then you kind of know, you can kind of roughly tell if someone is doing their job or not, right? Like if your jungler hasn't farmed up X amount of items in X amount of time period, you kind of know where the blame lies. You can be like, whoa, what are you doing, dude? Like, you should have this item by now. And like, if your supports haven't bought the wards to scout for you, then you're like, what are you doing? You're not doing your job right. Whereas in Overwatch, it's kind of just like, nobody really knows what even they're supposed to do. So trying to figure out what everyone else was like doing or doing wrong is so muddied, particularly when there's so much hybrid in so many of the tanks and so many of the supports, even, where like who deems what a Roadhog did right? Like, he's gonna be like, oh, I went in the back line, I drew 2 people to me, and then other people are like, no, you should be doing this and you should be picking this. So again, the like that structure that is missing creates partly this chaos, I suppose.
It's always changing as well. Like, the right answer might change in a week, right? Where, and sometimes Flank Hog felt more like a throw, I would say, especially when he didn't have the ability to walk with Breather. But then when he got that, then it's like, well, then he can sort of escape on those positions better. So, it's tricky, because even when you make a rule, then it changes. Like with Ana right now, you really want to go for aggressive plays, because your healing numbers don't really stack up against the other characters that just focus on healing. So, but that wasn't always the case necessarily. When she was released, the best thing you could do is all stay together and bionate everybody.
Watch Pog.
Yeah, nightmares of that. I am attempting to like gear this towards content, which is supposedly why we're here, and I feel at fault for drawing us into my angry uncle rants, as I do around the holidays. It's my default position, of course.
Well, let's draw this back to content then. I think that
one of the things I wanted to talk about that you brought up, Freedo, was that feeling, like soul-sucking feeling of playing ranked, and the fact that, like, say, you watch Tim the Tatman and he's queuing for 20 minutes, and like he can, Tim the Tatman can fill 20 minutes fine, but somebody whose whose way that they got well known through Twitch is playing one hero, they're sitting there looking at a queue screen for 20 minutes. You don't see that as a viewer, person consuming their content, and they're like, oh man, I want to go play that now. I want to go look at a queue screen for 20 minutes. Like, that doesn't get me excited about Overwatch. Like, I had that feeling before of, you watch someone that, say you're like a Zarya player, like I play off tank, you watch a really good off tank player and you're like, oh, I really want to go play off tank now. Whereas now it's like, you watch your, maybe not off tank, but you watch, say, your DPS player queue for 20 minutes, you're like, well, that's not what I want to do with my time. I don't want to spend my time queuing for 20 minutes to just get one soul sucking experience. And I think that's why there's that feeling of like, where are those 10 million people? Because the content creators aren't enjoying it. Or, the content creators that are focused around like playing ranked, that sort of content creator, they're not enjoying it. So it kind of has that feeling that those people just aren't there.
And I think that we talked about kind of the control over the game as being kind of one of the things that can make it frustrating to play, not just in the yin queue, but I think that the presence of voice comms also kind of makes it challenging for a streamer. Whereas if we're comparing like the 2 games that we've compared to previously, like League of Legends, I've played a little bit, but as far as I'm aware, League of Legends doesn't have a team voice comms, or at least not by default. Somebody want to confirm that? Who plays League?
I think you're correct.
Okay. I'm sure chat will yell at me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure from the time that I played League, everything was text chat, and there wasn't even an option for voice chat. Honestly, with how toxic text chat was, I never even looked in the options to see if I could enable a team chat. But when you are playing Hearthstone or playing League as a streamer, right, you can talk to your chat or you narrate. There's no kind of separation there. Where I think that there are some streamers who do this, who just kind of either mute or don't really talk to their teammates, and they just pretty much interact with their team, which doesn't make them the most optimal competitive player. Whereas if you are kind of trying to be purely optimally competitive, then that makes you less of an entertainer. So there is also this larger kind of debt or sacrifice or choice to make as a content creator, whether or not you're being competitive and playing the game and working with your team, or whether you're kind of muting and ignoring it and being an entertainer to chat. And even for those who try and do it hybrid, where they do a push to talk or a push to mute in order to talk to both their team and their chat, you do basically both jobs half-assed. And then on top of that, as a streamer, whenever you're talking to somebody in comms, that kind of gives whoever you queue into, even if they don't know who you are, they can affect you, your content, your audience. And if they do know who you are, oh boy, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is anyone want to kind of add on that? I have thoughts as well, but I'm gonna let anyone else take it if they want to.
I mean,
But
personally, whenever I was playing comp, like I haven't touched comp in like 6 months. Uh, Other than just playing with friends at like Clash or something like that. But when I was playing, I'd be top 500 consistently, and I just wouldn't join voice at all. Like because for me, I don't really see Overwatch as like a way to get like a social output that a lot of people do. Like when they're comp, they're sort of messing around and stuff. I just see it as like a game that's fun to play, and the toxicity and the sort of like downsides of comp, those sort of ruin it for me. Like if someone's horrible to you in comp, like I'm just like that's I don't want to listen to that. In the same way, like a six because most of these people are just kids and stuff. Like some 16-year-old kid comes up into the street and says something stupid to you, you just walk away. Same way with comp, it's just mute it and leave it. For me, voice chat most of the time makes it not an enjoyable experience rather than adding to it. And at the end of the day, like if I can consistently stay top 500 with voice chat turned off, I don't see myself as doing anything wrong. So I know some people in the community would massively disagree with that and want to force me into voice chat at all costs. So.
Oh yeah, yeah.
well, yeah,
No,
I don't blame you though. Definitely. I mean, I've kind of gotten over this myself, and I've of course have friends who are very vehemently towards pro voice chat. But
Mm.
I think the game's hard enough as it is that like if someone doesn't want to engage, like it's not going to increase the team's performance necessarily.
Oh, it would absolutely.
I mean, even
decrease.
calming at any rank sometimes is just a throw, even though it should be good. It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of players, especially like on console, where voice chat's a lot less common. That are like, I wish everyone would join voice chat. I'm like, with mixed results.
Grass is always greener.
Yeah,
Well,
like
the
even
interesting thing I see is that in a lot of like lower ranked VODs and stuff, I watch a lot of like low view count streamers just because I enjoy the chat interaction a lot more, that you don't get on higher view count streamers. And a lot of the time, with low rank streamers, you see that there's actually more comms in like a bronze game than you would have in like top 500. But the comms are so bad. Like they're
right.
making these huge plans. Like, okay, I'm going to go in here, breach this window, blah, 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 and it's like, yeah, they've already capped the point. Like it's 50%. You finally got your plan through, and it's like, yeah, that's not useful for most people. Like
Yeah.
it feels like it's useful, but it really isn't.
I would agree. Also, there's a big regional difference, EU versus NA. I mean, EU
Oh, for
basically has
sure.
no comms, and NA
Yeah.
has
Hello.
way too much, often of just plain out wrong comms. Like they love
Yes.
talking, but they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. At one point, I know SVB wanted to go, but I want to just chime this in as well. When we talk about like 10 million players in a month, my question to that is, what percentage of them are like one-time sign-ins to see whatever big change they made in that month? And the reason why that's a problem is because I think implicitly what we all know and why we keep talking about ranked is that the hardcore player base, like the meat of people who are continuously playing the game hours wise, not just tuning in to see, just keep up with the game. Those are the lifeblood of the game, whether it's like Destiny, I think is a great example of a game that's like this, where game goes up and down, health, whatever, but people are like actively playing it and care about the content of it. Whereas Overwatch, a lot of people have the attitude I think you have, where it's like, I did that once, I tried it. Like it's almost like a crazy girlfriend you check up on Facebook just to say, oh, she's dating him now. Oh, no wonder, right? Like that, oh, they overbuffed this character. Like great, like that's the almost the feeling I think a lot of viewers have, and how I've kind of adapted my content a bit. Like I try to make it as useful for the people who are actually playing it, but I always have in the back of my mind that a percentage of them might just be tuning in to keep up with what's even going on with the game, not wanting to sign in. Maybe they've uninstalled themselves.
God, there's actually so much I want to feedback, because as you mentioned, there's another thing that kind of came to my mind, which is the perception of Overwatch as being a shit game, or like a game that we don't enjoy, that content creators don't enjoy. Actually, I think is one of the biggest things we probably don't address, but maybe should address, is that I think most content creators come from the perspective of like, yeah, lol, shit game, why do we even keep playing this, am I right, ha ha ha. And that's kind of almost the meme, but it's also the perception where it's like, oh, they, you kind of mentioned, oh, they added another broken character, or they overbuffed this dude. And I mean, yeah, most games have their cranky communities, but I don't know if they necessarily have the same level of like active negativity, like love to hate nature of like their own game, which I feel like we might do as Overwatch players.
And I think that one of the things is like everyone knows that Overwatch is a great game and there's basically nothing else out there like it. And I think that one of the things is that everyone has their aspect of the game that they enjoy. Like Freedo might like quick. This is going to be a generalization, but Freedo likes quick play. Andy likes solo queuing with comms off on a Friday night with a beer or workshop.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
the thing that I enjoy is the like not just like the Overwatch League competitive, but 12 people in a lobby playing together where everybody has it's like it is a great game where you don't have to worry about kind of the randomness of teammates and that you are trying to do something together. I love that. And there are little pockets of the game all over the place that individuals really like, but the overall experience or kind of what you have to do in order to get what you specifically like could be challenging, or maybe for some people the magic of the game just they can't get it back for whatever reason and there's nothing else to go to.
I
Well,
think
yeah.
the thing is,
Go ahead, Andy. Go
it's
ahead.
like Overwatch is a game that's defined by its potential. Like I think everyone here agrees that Overwatch has huge potential to be an amazing game, but
Yeah.
it's just oftentimes, be it like meta or like content droughts, we're just in places where it feels like I'm not going to use it's not a shit game. Like Overwatch is definitely not a shit game, but people aren't happy with the current state of it. Because they can see how good it can be, but it's just not at that point in time. And I think that's like for the past year, with the announcement of Overwatch 2 and then the just huge drought of content and kind of patches too, like kind of feels like those experimental patches are kind of just biding us along until we get to Overwatch 2. It's not like they're really significant. We haven't had some we've had that health change, or not the health, what was it? It's like overall damage. See, I
The
don't
ult
follow.
charge change?
What was this
You
past
just
couple months? Man, I'm bad at following patches.
I
Unless it's
mean
a workshop
they
patch, I'm not
You
reduced
mean where they
following
just
it.
the
nerfed all
ultimates
the
by
damage?
15%.
Yeah, that thing there.
Yeah.
Like other than that, I can't think of any huge changes that have happened in the past year to the game in terms of meta, or sorry, not meta, but like huge balance changes that we might have gotten in previous years. And I think we're just kind of in that limbo until Overwatch 2 comes out is the issue, and that's why people are kind of skewing more negative towards the game overall. Be it in ranked or content.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was alluding to with my worry. I suppose I shouldn't worry too much because what I was gonna say, my concern is that when a perception becomes like dominant for too long, it becomes hard to shake it. And I wonder to some extent if the whole Overwatch is a shit game that's doomed to like constantly have bad development balance and like unfun characters would like stick around too much. Because even like the most popular content creators come from that perspective, and they have been doing for the last several months, where they're like, God, rank feels like a shithole. Ha ha ha! I guess I'm gonna queue up again. Ha ha ha! I'm gonna take a break to play Pokemon just to bring up the will to go play rank again. But then we did have that patch where everyone was happy and everyone was like, actually, it's the greatest place it's ever been. It's the greatest it's ever been. Seagull came back and was like, Overwatch is amazing now, guys. It's all good. Go play it again.
It's all
And then
good.
and everybody was happy, and it was rainbows in the sky. And then the buff patch came through again, and now back we went to our default state. And yeah, so that's one element of that whole perception thing. I also want to finish off the point on voice comms. And whenever we have discussions like these, I always end up just thinking, maybe we just need to like strip Overwatch down and just be quick play, basically. I know Freedo will be like,
You're joining the
"Ah, it's
Freedo
quick
Club,
play."
are you?
I'm the Freedo Club, but it's just like something like voice comms, for example. Take voice comms. I almost wonder if it's like one of those biggest red herrings in the game, where it's like, it feels like it's never it never satisfies. Basically, it's like you either have people who are like, I'm annoyed because there's only 3 people in voice chat with me and the other 2 people aren't there and they make the game shit, or you'll have 6 people but then 1 person isn't listening, or 1 person 2 people are toxic, or even when all 6 people are calming, they'll lose 1 fight and then it's all hell breaks loose and it's like, no, your shit, your plan was like, oh, I'm not gonna do what you're saying, I'm not gonna do what you're saying. And it's like almost like this red herring of like, much like the larger metaphor of Overwatch, where we keep seeming to trying to chase something that we never quite grab of the perfect Overwatch. The perfect voice comms never seem to come either, at least in amongst randoms. Like, of course it makes complete sense in scrims and pro level, but with like these randoms, it feels like this constant holy grail we chase, where we're like, one day I'll get all 6 people in comms and they're all listening and they're all coordinating to the same plan, and it never happens. And maybe just like never having anyone in comms might just make everyone's life easier. I don't know. That's just a stray thought.
I actually think that you've convinced me that voice comms is probably a bad idea for ranked. I mean, even if you want to have voice comms in ranked, that just encourages you to queue with friends who, they're not going to be just raging assholes. My mind also goes to you know, the women who I know who play ranked, like
Exactly,
that's
yeah.
just holy moly. But you know, if they like them or anyone else just kind of want to have that voice comm for ranked, they can have that by finding friends or a kind of group to play with and then queue together. I mean, it's 2020. It's not like Discord's hard to set up. You know, TeamSpeak used to be, I suppose, a little tiny obstacle, but it was always, you know, even Ventrilo before that. But no, I think that you make a great point that maybe one of the things that could help Overwatch is that, you know, everybody knows that Overwatch has a lot of potential, and it has a lot of potential to be a lot of different things, and everyone, you know, wants it to be something a little bit different. So maybe we just give people the opportunity to more craft it into whatever they want rather than trying to just make everyone happy.
I feel like I've ranted on this subject so many times that I don't want to, for the sake of the viewers' ears, go too far down this road, in case they already know what my opinions on this are. But yeah, if we didn't have ranked at all, it was the reason why I don't like ranked is that it is just quick play plus. And I look to other games that, you know, Hearthstone recently is a decent example where they make a new mode and you have a casual MMR too, and then they eventually came out with ranked on duels. But if you wanted to, you could just see your MMR on casual and never, you know what I mean? It's like the same queue. You're playing the same game. Like the way they structure this, it could be different. Like maybe there's a way that you could see your MMR on your career profile for quick play or hide it or whatever, right? Like it's using the same matchmaking anyway. That's the crazy thing about how quick play matchmaking often works better, because all the expectations of why people go in there is different. They're not like, oh, let me see what rank I can get only playing this character or whatever route they're trying to go. And in ranked, it feels like there's a higher percentage of that mindset of player, whatever it may be, or just based on their own limitations. I mean, we all suffer from this. It's impossible to be good at every character, no matter how meta they are, right? So that comes up as a problem as well. But the problem is your teammates are always beholden to your path through ranked, and with that always being a problem, I just want a way for us to reliably group together, so whatever your limitations are on your friends, you know, responsibility to pick up. Like it's totally fine to play only one character. In fact, it's some of the most interesting full teams we've seen is the ones that, you know, Yeatle playing Ball or Clockwork Vendetta or whatever it is, right? Like a group of misfits playing yeah, that's like the core of Overwatch excitement, actually, is finding those. But what makes ranked chaotic is that you never know who you're going to get with the roll the dice of the matchmaker. So yeah, that's I guess maybe in a nutshell, my problems with ranked. In like it's not further, it's not far enough from quick play for me to see it as a distinguished thing. And the things it does do often, I think, it like hurts the experience itself. Whereas I've said in the past, like if you had to unlock ranked like you do in Smash, where everyone's just on the MMR system, and then you reach a certain point, then you're in ranked, or like, you know, the try hard, sweaty, competitive mode. I almost wonder if everyone would just have a better enjoyment of the game. Like if you flattened it like that with the matchmaker, because if they're going to be so similar anyway, like I just don't see the point. Like I don't see the community reaction like, oh, I'm playing ranked. Now this is a new experience. Some people argue with me on this. Obviously, they're like, no, Freedo, you know, what I feel like ranked is the only place I can get any teamwork. But I think more and more the numbers are on my side, especially I see it in my queue times with, I mean, quick play queue times are always low, which is where I get the impression that the numbers truly are for the game. Also, another thing to remember too, if we're on the upper echelons of skill, I mean, Diamond's 10%, right? Like that's where queue times get a little funky with the 10 million mark, because it starts to slice the pie so thin that, yeah, even among that player base, there's just not that many players. So anyway.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack there. Jayne, Andy, either of you have any sort of immediate response to that?
I mean,
Nothing concrete.
that very last thing you said there, tournaments. Yeah, like you brought this up last time we were on this, and a weekend tournament system. I am so for that.
Oh,
like,
please, like League's clash system, gimme.
Like that's exactly what the game needs in terms of satisfying the tryhard sweaty rank people. Like they want that number to say, "Oh, I'm number one in my region," or however they decide to divide it up. Um, yeah, that like that would solve so many problems.
Another thing I forgot about as well that I meant to put in the creator Discord, and maybe I will now. I don't know why there isn't some sort of soft decay on seasons as well, because this is a thing that's happened to me, right? For example, like maybe I peak GM on tank, then the tank meta changes completely, and the tanks I'm good at are bad, and I lose a lot of SR. Okay, now they buff Rhine. Now I'm gaining SR and stomping the same people. I feel like so many players in the flex queue system we have now are just constantly going like this. Up and down, because the balance goes this way, balance goes that way. Like Sim's great this meta, Steve-O's in the top 100. Sim's not so great. Like what? I don't really see the point in any of it, really. That's the thing. Whereas if you have like this momentary thing and you can like achieve something in this event, then you can say like you can even get rewards for those timed things, and then maybe see what characters you played to accomplish, third in the weekly bronze tournament. It's like, well, we played this wacky comp and whatever, like as a time capsule, because otherwise, like I don't see like that sense of ownership of your accomplishments mattering too much, because if people look at your profile now and it's like, well, you reached this rank on that broken character or this broken character or whatever, right? You know what I mean? Or you're a one trick and your SR fluctuated with the balanced state of the meta. So it's like, I don't feel like the players get to feel ownership of those accomplishments enough with how radically the game is always changing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we kind of, I asked this question last time on the Great Support debate where I was just like, what is the point of seasons? And literally nobody had an answer, where they were all just like, I don't know. And that again comes back to the idea of like, I don't know, because unless you can correctly identify like, oh yeah, well season 21 was when Orisa was strong, so this person climbed on Orisa. Well, I now invalidate all their season climbs. Like, I feel like anything that could give seasons more reason to exist would be a good one. And something like a decay. I mean, the community is always asking for some form of decay, MMR reset, blah blah blah. But something
weekly decay is kind of terrible feeling, unfortunately. That's why I think it should go on seasons, because the soft 3900 reset thing they did, I feel like that was a pretty good success for that top echelon of players, because the MMR stays the same, right? That's the beauty of this. The MMR matchmaking is the same anyway, and then all these players they're like work their way up to 4,700 or however high people get nowadays. So, but that's just like a small thing. I feel like there should be a systematic thing for all players to enjoy that kind of sense of accomplishment. Whereas if you're not grinding for top 500, and a lot of players just don't even see the value in it anyway, but that's like the only stick or carrot we have to chase right now. But I fully expect this to be dealt with in Overwatch 2. If it's not, they're just like massively dropping the ball. There's no way that they don't build this into the game. Immo. So hopefully that changes the content perspective as well. Again, always trying to bring it back. Like, this is why streamers struggle to play the game. This is why content creator people ask me like, Freedo, why don't you stream? You don't want to see me stream. I don't want to. I can hardly. Sometimes I can't handle this game more than 10 minutes in ranked. So there's a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of people in that boat where you got to be some special kind of human in order to handle the system as it's built right now.
I think that tournament system would help with content. Like you see Fran's Community Cup, like those are huge. I mean, like obviously the play isn't top level play, but for content, people love it. There's so much more personality going into something like Fran's Community Tournament, or like any tournament that just lets teams enter as they wish. Just lets Yeetle form a team with a bunch of other players similar to him. People enjoy that sort of stuff, and I think that sort of community tournament, the weekend tournament system would encourage that sort of stuff. Because people want to watch that. Absolutely, people want to watch that. It's just there's no system for it, and I think when Overwatch League players tried to do a like scrim, tournament type thing, it got shut down. I think like in season 1 of Overwatch League, they tried to broadcast, just sort of pug style stuff, and if I recall, it wasn't allowed by Blizzard. So, I'm totally there with you in that. If Blizzard haven't thought of at least some, I don't know if they'll have it on release, because obviously Overwatch 2 is a PvE game. But if they haven't got plans for it, I don't know what they're doing in terms of ranked. I have no clue, you know. But yeah, that's one of those things that I really hope they do at some point.
Yeah, I
mean,
think that
go ahead, Jayne. Go ahead, Jayne.
it was just to talk about like the friend community cup stuff. I used to do a lot of tournaments like that, and two of the most popular tournaments that I ever ran. One of them was called the Peasant Cup, where we had everybody sign up, regardless of what rank they were, and then we had mixed SR teams. So every team would have like one top 500, one masters, one gold, one plat, one silver, one bronze, and then so all of the teams had the same average SR. Some people would just have like, more clustered, but the person who got like the 1500 SR bronze player also got the 4500 SR player. So we did it like that. And that tournament was always like, the most popular and it had a ton of viewership. And then the only one that kind of beat that was we did a proper like widow.
So, this is just a quick word for those of you listening on podcast services, or any of you who aren't paying attention to the screen anymore. My internet died at this point, so the stream cut for a bit, which is why it will now abruptly jump topics, and there's reference to my returning. Sorry about that.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that it exists, honestly. But
Yeah, no, fair play to you.
all right, well, that was a really fun discussion that Chad didn't get to hear.
All right, what did I miss?
Great points,
what did I miss,
Jayne.
guys? What did I miss?
So I think. Do you want to summarize, Andy?
Real quick, we fixed Overwatch. Sorry, you
Oh,
missed
great.
that. We were actually going to just send on to Jeff, and he'll sort everything.
Jeff
out.
actually joined the call, and he just left as you joined back.
Oh.
It's remarkable the timing of that.
He's been DMing me relentlessly, and I keep powering him. I'm glad you guys are finally able to answer his questions. Okay, so what was the most recent topic of discussion?
I will summarize, and then we'll pass it off to another topic. But so I was talking about the success of tournaments, like France Community Cup, and I was saying how some of the communities tournaments that I ran were extremely successful. I was talking about the Peasant Cup one, where there is a mixed SR, where all the teams have the same average SR, but a team will have like a bronze and a top 500 player playing together. Obviously that makes it really interesting, because it's like, can you spot the bronze? Can you spot the top 500? Is the bronze a liability? How hard is the top 500 carrying? What are their strategies based off of having strong players, weak players? Like, these are all interesting things that people care about, and because the competitive integrity is kind of thrown out the window, it's not a serious tournament. You can do things like jumping into the comms and listening to the top 500 player try and carry, while maybe the masters, the GM player, is trying to shot call and like babysit the bronze and show them what they need to be doing so that they don't have like this dead weight. And then another one of the kinds of tournaments that I ran that was my most successful tournament of all time was just a straight up Widowmaker tournament on Chateau Guillard with a lot of like top 500 and contenders levels players. And I think again with that one, we had the ability to jump into comms and listen to the Widowmaker players like shit talk each other while they were fighting each other. And I think that was really cool. So like France Community Cup, there's obviously a desire for that sort of thing there. But I think that we need to kind of look at more of these fun tournaments and stop trying to be like so black suit, so serious, and be like her competitive integrity sort of thing. I mean, like the prize pools for these are kind of like whatever anyway. Where I think that there's definitely a desire for us, and I would like to go more towards like the casual fun tournaments where we can focus on the interactivity, the engagement, and the entertainment rather than the competitive integrity aspect of tournaments. And I was relating that back to how my coaching and my educational content was successful, not because I was coaching to the Grandmaster or the top 500 level, but because I was kind of focusing it on golds, platinums, and diamonds. And then from there, we were talking about Elohell's Good tournament. And then we got to the point about volunteer economics, how one of the reasons that I'm not doing those tournaments right now, even though they are extremely successful, is because in order to host tournaments of that size, it requires a very large amount of man-hour and skilled man-hours. People need to know how to run lobbies. They need to know how to do observing. They need to know how to do casting. Some people need to do administrative work, like writing handbooks and rule books, chat moderation, all these things that are like skilled work. And then in my case, if I were to run those tournaments, I would be the one who is basically directly profiting, or like the revenue of all these volunteers would go to me, and I have an ethical problem with that. And we were also discussing kind of, because Andy had mentioned something about Get Good being popular in Ireland and how they had to schedule pugs around it, whereas Get Good is one of the tournaments that Elohell runs that is a community tournament. And there are still some volunteers working on it, even though they're trying to get to the point where it's entirely paid. So that's kind of where we left off, I think. Andy, did I miss anything?
No, I think other than like the whole saving Overwatch,
Oh yeah,
fixing
and
every balance
Jeff
problem.
showing up.
Yeah.
No,
But that's pretty much it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And already I see there's a lot of interesting things I missed off because I call the starter when you were talking about tournaments, and I had like a throwaway thought, which is that yesterday when I was ending my stream, I was looking at the Overwatch directory on Twitch, and Contenders was streaming, and Emong had 3 times the viewership as
Oh
Contenders.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah. Like, this was back like when Contender was streaming at that point in time, there was like 1.7 to 2.1K average viewers. And I remember that because I was writing these stats out, and where I could run a tournament that had literal plat players, like Peasant Cup, and it would get 4 or 5K viewers. It's like, I do think that at some point, especially if there's no narrative, and we talked earlier, like an hour ago, Andy was talking about kind of the narrative around players and teams kind of deteriorating in the Overwatch League, where their worth and their stakes have been reduced. Those stakes and those narratives have never really been well established or communicated within contenders. And I think that really hurts its appeal, whereas you can very easily engineer those in these more kind of casual, focused, entertaining tournaments, and you could more or less call them community events rather than tournaments, because the point isn't to win, the point's to participate, enjoy it, have a full day of Overwatch with friends amongst a community, etc.
yeah, I know this comes back to the whole point of like in a way we keep gravitating towards thinking about the esports and the best versions of Overwatch, but many people don't have any interest in that, and the reality is the fun is as important as anything else. And again, I experience this as well, Jayne, as someone who kind of inhabits a similar sphere of content creation where it's like, yesterday I hosted the Unlucky Challenge where we took players who think they belong in a higher rank, and we put them to the test. We made a custom lobby of players of the rank they think they're in. So for example, silvers who think they belong in master, and we put them with 11 masters and let them see how that goes. Like those are always way more interesting. And like, although I cast them, and okay, this is gonna sound like a little bit of a humble brag, but I cast them. People are like, oh, this is way more fun than Overwatch League. Like your casting is way
Yeah.
more fun because it's just like, it's just fun. It's not serious. It's not like trying to necessarily focus on the intricacies of cooldown management, even though sometimes I will explain that if that's what causes the fight to go wrong. I think it's just a bit like about taking a bit of a more of an entertainment perspective, I suppose, to sum it up, rather than always
Yeah.
necessarily thinking of it as the most optimal Overwatch.
And those comments are not uncommon. The same sort of thing. Like we did one of the on my November 23rd stream, which was the one on the Blizzard launcher. I had Uber come on, and we casted a game with bronzes and silver players, right? And it was Uber and I going like full force hype mode, like narratives, hyping up these bronze players. People were like, "Wow, these bronze players are like they're actually doing pretty good." Sort of thing. And then a lot of like, even for that was probably one of the highest densities in recent memory, where we did have a lot of comments like, I enjoyed that more than I did the Overwatch League. And it's because there was a narrative, right? It was something interesting. People came here to see whether or not bronze players were capable of doing this or competing. They were interested in these storylines of these people. They wanted to hype for the little guy. Now, in the same, like, I have this kind of same sort of concern around the FOC, the Friends Overwatch Community Cup, where if Uber and I were to do that sort of thing multiple times, I think that the interest would fade off as people it would become old hat. It has a certain novelty to it, but trying to maintain the interest and engagement in something over time is really quite difficult. It's the Gartner hype cycle if we want to talk academically. And this same sort of thing struggles with Overwatch, where Overwatch has very much passed its novelty phase. But even then, you do have things that kind of grow in popularity over time. Smash community, Rainbow Six community sort of thing. And I think that there's some definite things that could be learned from those communities, which just also so happen to be esports communities. But Overwatch League needs to kind of learn some things. And then for you, SVB, I think that it's probably a problem that you'll have to reflect on if you do the unlucky challenge for any significant period of time, is eventually people are just going to know what to expect. And if those expectations kept being met, then the audience is going to get bored of it. It's straight up.
It's always
You
something
kind of
that
say
I've
that
had to
for
do.
Overwatch League, though. Like Overwatch League, our expectations have been met. We kind of know what to expect. Like, there's no, Overwatch League is being the same thing over and over again. Like, that's how I feel personally with Overwatch League, and I don't feel like I'm too unique in that either.
No,
I feel like my opinion is shared amongst many people. Of
it's one of the
it's the
reasons
same
why
thing.
Avast lows the regular season. There's no stakes. Expectations are
Mm.
minimal, if there at all. Very few surprises, and the things that do happen don't matter. So, that's where people are trying to talk about doing more of these tournament system where it's like you have, instead of stages, you just do these more regular tournaments and maybe just a qualifier for it. So I think at some point, people like John Spector are trying to address this, but it's not just for Overwatch League, it's also for any kind of content. And I think that there is a surprising subset of content that avoids this. When something does kind of become uh, not relatable, but just kind of, like Guess My
Predictable.
SR, for example. Guess My SR is something that uh, is a little bit of a magical piece of content for things that I probably still don't quite understand. But no matter how much Guess My SR I do, people always want more, and it's rare to find a piece of content like that.
Do you think
Well, I
it's
think it's
because people? Oh, sorry. Go on, SVB.
no, Andy, you go, you go.
Yeah. Do you think like I've also always wondered with Guess My SR, like that pulls huge numbers and people are really engaged. Do you think it's because people like see the chance? Oh, I can be, like Jayne, this famous person will uh, put me on stream and like I'll get that bit of attention, or like why do people love Guess My SR so much?
The best answer that I can give you is that I think it is a serendipitous intersection of many, many factors. I think that that's definitely one of them. Not only because people will regularly tell me that they submit a clip to Guess My, like the people who submit my clips or clips to my Guess My SR, it's watched by enough people that when they play Overwatch for the next week, people recognize them. They'd be like, "Oh shit,
Wow.
I saw your clip on Guess My SR." So like, there's definitely an aspect of social proofing where some people will submit because they want to show off how good they are. They want validation that they're not at the rank that they deserve. They want to share something funny. They want attention. So there's definitely social proofing there. Then there's the kind of the parasociality aspect of it where they want my commentary on it if they're a fan of me, or they want kind of like a opinion. They're like, I know what I think about this clip. What does Jayne think about this clip? And then on top of that, I guess you can kind of do the social proofing, an additional level of that, of what does the audience think of the clip. So they're kind of like being judged by their peers. And a lot of people, for that attention is really quite a very highly desirable thing. But the other sort of thing, I think that it is kind of, um, uh, so this is one of the things that I really from. I think that any good content um, is based around a singular 5-second moment. So that 5-second moment, for example, in the Overwatch League, comes from an overtime fight when it's decided who wins a series or who wins the Overwatch League Grand Championship. I think one of the really magic things about Guess My SR is that there are multiple 5-second moments within that piece. So if I have 9 clips, right, that means that there's 9 5-second moments. But then I can make other 5-second moments appear, including the conclusion, because it is a contest between me and chat, which adds the gamification nature of the contest as well, because chat isn't just playing to guess. Chat's playing because there's a stake about me beating them, and then can they be better than me at guessing these clips? And they can be like, "Oh, I'm wrong. Oh, I'm bad." And there's also this prevents a type of psychological bias where somebody who gets a piece of information, they will check to see if it's at least plausible or probable within their own mental models, and if they can deem it to be plausible, then they'll discard it. But a person having to put in a guess first and then get discounted can get frustrated that that doesn't fit what they thought it did, and it's kind of like where they have to keep competing to keep checking whether or not they're actually capable or good at that. And it's not just for themselves, but now they're competing against me. And then there's the additional factor of where this is kind of something where you have group dynamic, where it is a collective of people. Not only is it a little bit about the wisdom of the crowd, but also collective effort, where it is a group of people trying to organize themselves to come to an answer, decrying the people who are trying to troll, keep them in check, actually trying to be like, we should have guessed this, or if somebody thinks that the guess is going really wrong, they will like scream in chat in all caps, be like, no, look at this aspect, sort of thing. So it is this kind of unruly, chaotic nature of the crowd trying to guess against me, and then I get to play the game of trying to like fuck with them. I can be like, or like, and I can really very easily influence chat, and it drives the people crazy who are trying to actually play competitively, and the people who are just there for fun like antagonizing those people. So it's just this absolute chaotic storm of social factors. And there's a few other things that I've identified, but I think that's probably a good enough summary of Guess My SR as a piece of content.
I love this. I'd love to do like a thesis on why is Guess My SR popular. It would just be like the source of another whole nother
It's
video.
probably gonna be the topic of my next blog post.
And with that, Jayne died, and we were left with the last piece of advice he gave us, which is how to make Guess My SR popular. The other thing I think also to add to it is like, And again, because this is something, it's really fascinating listening to you talk to it, because it's something that I'm always thinking about as well. And I know, Freedo, you're probably thinking about too. And you probably don't have to necessarily deal with this rampant demand of how to come up with a popular format. But like, I'm always
That's
thinking about like what,
weird shit with the workshop, like.
yeah, like what is it that basically makes something popular or makes something appealing? I think another element of that is it taps into every Overwatch player's fundamental belief that the rank system is flawed. And the Guess My SR allows you a chance to deceive the rank system for a while by being like, see, you might think my SR is platinum, but when I tell you that it's gold, I will feel great. And that, I think, is kind of also the core to, for example, why I went with the unlucky challenge. Because I think the vast majority of Overwatch players think they're in the wrong rank. They don't always necessarily think that they are wildly in the wrong rank, but most of them think they're in the wrong rank, and they're waiting for that little moment for you to help them disprove the rank system and say, yes, see, I looked at your gameplay and I thought you were master, and I'm actually gold. See, I am better than everyone thinks I am.
So this is, and the other crazy thing is like, Guess My SR, just a thing. If you search like Jayne reacts to or something, people, whenever I react to their clip or their montage, they almost always take that and upload to their own channel. And I actually think like I have like 40 million views on YouTube or something. I wouldn't be surprised if about 10% of that, like 4 million views or something, are on other channels and other videos of just me reacting to Guess My SR clips. Like it is insane.
Freedo, have you got anything to add on this? Because obviously you are yourself a prolific content creator.
Yeah, I've just been enjoying absorbing Jayne explain himself. I don't get to talk to Jayne as much as I'd like to. Great innovator in the space. It's really cool. I was really excited to see Jayne pop off onto the scene because almost immediately I could tell that you had just had a lot of your own ideas, which is rare to see because what people often do is, oh, Guess My SR is good, I'll do that too and change the name slightly or whatever, right? Like, and that's fine, right? Competition's great, but I get excited when I see people take like a completely different angle to it, and I think you and SVB have done a great job with this concept of the mixing of ranks and almost like the roguelite elements. I want to circle all the way back. Okay, I'm sitting here absorbing for a while. We were talking about like splitting up competitive and these fun things. I think we can take a lot of these lessons that we were discussing and apply them to the competitive format to improve it, because these fun, you said something that was great in context just for the tournament, but I think also we can apply it to the whole format of competitive Overwatch, which is it's held back by the competitive restraints. And to me, that just means the format needs to change. Like when Andy says, well, I got bored of Overwatch League, it's the same thing. To me, anyway, and maybe, I could be wrong, but to me, the reason why competitive Overwatch gets stale is because it's always about cheesing the meta. Like, and it's a race to cheese the meta, right? Whereas me and SVB go at great length waxing philosophical about StarCraft 2 and the many ways you can go about winning a game and the different play styles. I mean, there was a guy that was like, oh, who's his name? Is it Haz? There you go.
Yeah. I knew when you were like, there's a guy, I was like, it's Haas, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, right. Like, I mean, yeah, Haas is like the Clockwork Vendetta of StarCraft, and just, on an off tournament can win with cannon rushes or something. And it's oh, we lost Jayne. I was hoping we weren't
Jayne.
losing SVB this time. Okay.
Yeah. We lose one of us at a time. We're too powerful to exist in the same Discord.
This is a cursed podcast.
Yeah, people are always joining and leaving. At some point, hopefully Jeff rejoins. Then he can explain all this for us. But anyway, my grand point is, I think we need to worry about engineering that into the competitive format. Like, all those things are right about the casual thing. In fact, I was thinking back to like when we talk about these weekend tournaments that we hope happen, you can have a week where it's mystery heroes, or give me a hero gauntlet one, baby. I love that mode, right? Like I want to actually like compete at a mode I like, or whatever, right? You can have infinite. This is the route we should go. But because we're always worried so much about competitive integrity, then like ranked suffers, because if you group, you get punished. I'm not going to even go into that. Like, I understand why that is the way it is, but that also means it's attempting to appeal to everyone at the same time. And I think the competitive format is the same way, where like the debates have been raging on forever about hero bans or hero limitations or things like that. Either that, I mean, I feel like just yesterday we finally got Blizzard on board with like picking your own maps is actually really good. So like we're like step one of putting our toe into that. Like that is should have been done years ago. So that's why often I maybe my terminology or verbiage is more rude on the competitive structure, but I just think it needs like, it's unfortunate we kicked off the competitive aspect of the game so quickly, whereas other games, Counter-Strike, for example, was played casually, as much as you can with that game for like years and years and years and years. And then it's like, maybe we'll try hostage mode. Maybe we'll try this. And then we got diffuse. And how many people should you have? You play a casual game of Counter-Strike, there's like 20 people in the lobby, and it makes no sense. And it's not a competitive experience. But then you go into the rank mode and it's 5v5, there's smoke executes and all this. Like that's the layer of step up of my expectations of being a competitive gamer for years and years and years that I want Overwatch to fulfill. I mean, if COD can do it, we can, right? But I think we can take a lot of these lessons and just implement it into the game in so many different ways, rather than like having everything have to have this like sheer of pristine format. Like this is how Blizzard intended it, right? Like so many decisions feel to me like, well, the design of the game was you could pick all heroes all the time. Well, enjoy 6 tracers and 6 divas jumping out of the cart. Then like that's, I feel there's so many routes we can nitpick and say, well, obviously you're going to get this result, whether it's mirroring meta or whatever, and not having team expression. That's the main problem, is that it's very difficult to have teams or players have their own expression. And even luckily with the format changes to OWL this year, because you could pick your own maps, then we could see Florida pick a tracer friendly map and play tracer, and it's like, oh my god, a different hero. Oh boy. It's almost like, that's, to me, that's the whole basis of why people like Overwatch. So if the competitive format isn't serving to do that, like the game actually plays like it's TF2, where you will have limited heroes and you have to mirror basically, whereas the player base has the expectation that there's going to be a lot of different things mixing it up. So they attempted hero pools, massive mistake. But I think we're circling the content problem here. We're like solving Overwatch League while solving ranked, and so it all plays in together, right? Where my hope anyway is that with Overwatch 2 having so many casual features, then they can properly deal with this competitive format problem. Because there's one upside to the chaos of ranked, is that you get to see a lot of different stuff. Whereas the higher up you go, then it's like you get shouted down for even attempting to play something else. And partially rightly so, because it's like, well, this is the format, we want to win, so play the best stuff. But I want to express myself. There's always that conflict there because you're beholden to your team. So yeah, random teammate problem, example 1,000. That's the end of my rant. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Peace. No, yeah. Again, there's so much to unpack there. And to kind of throw the spanner in the works as well, the irony is that, again, I agree with everything you said, and yet the irony is that like all the most popular Overwatch streamers are top 500 players, and yet we've kind of gone on and on in length about like how at its nature it's a casual game, and everybody loves the casual element of it, and yet somehow we always aspire and model to the best player. I suppose that's probably true of most games. But still, there's that some element of like, there's this casual element we just haven't quite tapped into, where making content that's just focused on what the majority of the players experience, which is like Mr. Heroes, which is wildly more popular than anyone ever realizes, I think. And like nobody's like quite there on bringing that to proper Overwatch.
I don't know if they watch content though. That's the thing. Like they do in the peaks of the game for sure. Like when new stuff's coming out or the new game comes out, the game's fresh, the game, 2016 Overwatch, they're watching content. But right now, I think the only people left watching are like either like dedicated fans of the game. So yeah, I think timing is very important with this conversation. We'll see how this changes when the new game launches, but I would say it's pretty difficult to have a pure casual appeal, because I think even the content you guys talk about that works now, it to me isn't that casual. Like the mixing of ranks, peasant cup, whatever. Like if that's like our benchmark of what is more appealing than super hardcore, to me it's still like somewhat, I don't know. I think it appeals to appeals to like a fan element of watching the game. It isn't like, to me, a casual Overwatch player barely plays the game but is like on the periphery. But that means they're not going to watch anything content, in this realm, if that makes sense. So I don't know. It's tough.
Well, one thing I've been dying to hear, in the immortal words of Kanye West, everything is the same. We've talked about Overwatch League, we've talked about content and everything like that, but I would love some insight into kind of what is kind of going on with the workshop community, how things are growing, any of the kind of narratives in that world, and where people are hoping that the workshop's going to go for Overwatch 2.
Yeah, it's funny actually you say that because last night I was in the workshop Discord, the Elo Hell workshop Discord, in fact, the
PogChamp.
number one workshop Discord there is, or the only one really. But yeah, I was talking to them there, and somebody was complaining, "Oh, no, like I made this mode, I spent like 50 hours on it, and like it's so good," and but nobody's playing it. I don't see anyone in the list, whatever it's called, the custom games browser. I don't see anyone playing it, and I'm like, man, it's something like workshop. If you want to promote something like that, you need to put in the effort elsewhere, because unfortunately, I don't know if people know this, but there's one workshop developer, and he's publicly stated that 1/3 of his time is on the workshop. That's it. So people that are suggesting like, oh, if we get huge changes to the custom games browser, to help people promote their modes, that's not going to happen. So what I was saying last night was like, you need to be the person to push forward your stuff. You need to go out to Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, VK, Bilibili, every single. This is what I'm doing personally, at least, is going to every website that I can think of, and trying to push forward the workshop content, because you're not going to get it pushed forward in the in-game system. Like the in-game system is terrible for pushing forward new content in terms of like actual workshop modes. Um, I certainly do wish that I had started not just workshop, but my overall Overwatch content career not on Reddit, because I have, like you were saying earlier there, Jayne, you had like 40 million views on YouTube. Man, if you're in the position you're at with 40 million views on YouTube, man, I wish I had started on YouTube instead of Reddit, where I have like 20 million views on various gifs and whatever
Yeah.
else content I've made, and I ain't seen a dime.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things where when SVB was talking about the people on Twitter, where it's like he's introducing them on YouTube, and YouTube people are like, who the hell is this, right? I think that there is a certain type of content creator who they are kind of drawn or at least incentivized by the financial returns, and Reddit is not a platform in
No.
which you have
Oh,
those
absolutely
kind of
not,
financial
yeah.
returns. Like Twitch and YouTube are both very comparable, but yeah, there's you are driven by a different kind of incentive when you create content on Twitter and Reddit and things like that. Reddit it's like on Instagram you have the indirect revenue model where if I put a post on Instagram, for example, there's the direct revenue model where Instagram will pay me, and then there's the indirect revenue model, which is, or sorry, so let's back up here. So a direct revenue model would be something like YouTube primarily,
YouTube,
because when
yeah.
I put content on YouTube, YouTube advertises my content and YouTube pays me. Indirect is Twitch and Patreon, where I'm on those platforms, but it's the users of the platform whose money goes to me. And then there's the third party, which is like Instagram, or if I post something on Instagram, that's a contract and a payment that happens off of the Instagram platform. Whereas like like Twitter, you don't have. I mean, so if you were a business entity, you have the opportunity for a direct revenue stream, and honestly, the RPMs on Twitter for business are insane. But on Reddit, you don't actually have the options for any of them. Even the third-party revenue stream on Reddit is disallowed by Reddit's terms of service.
Yeah.
So it's like being popular on Reddit does nothing for you
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
at all.
Like personally, I see it as like, if you're going to use Reddit to boost your own content, it should be to boost it, like to supplement it,
Yeah,
rather than
it's
just
it's so
dedicating
like
everything
it
to
is
that.
like an aggregator. It's supposed to, like, what it's good for. What Reddit is really good for is for introducing people to a platform where you do actually have a capture and there is a revenue stream. So, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, and that's what I've been trying to do over the past like 3 months or so, is trying to start up my YouTube channel and trying to push people towards it, because like I love making content. Like it's not like it's definitely not for the money. If it was for the money, I would have stopped like 2 years ago.
Hey man, if you've got
Um,
20 million views on Reddit, put them
you
on
know,
YouTube, and you'll be
yeah,
singing a different
exactly.
song.
But it's so hard. Well, at least in my experience, I think I find it so hard to push people from something like Reddit to a new YouTube channel, or like a different
Yeah,
channel that they're not used to. And actually, to be honest, like I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that,
we're
on how to achieve that.
we're getting to the point where this is advice that I would normally reserve for somebody like, we're getting part I always am really cautious about providing advice that Envy pays me to provide in
Oh,
private,
sure,
I
sure.
suppose. So if you want to have a private conversation about that,
This
just
is a
to
free seminar
summarize
now.
the higher level techniques, there is some sort of filter, and just to give it a piece of advice that's going to be more catered to maybe people in the audience who might be looking at starting their own Twitch revenue. There's going to be this funnel, and you have to build a funnel. And I'm going to skip over all the details about the funnel, but let's just say that if you are trying to get to affiliate, let's say affiliate, you have the 50 follower requirement, right? So there needs to be this funnel of kind of discovery is first, but then like capture is second. So people have to discover your content, and before that, so let's make our fictional funnel impressions, discovery, capture, and we could do retention, but we'll just do capture for now. So we'll just do a 3-tiered pyramid. So it's like, an impression is where somebody has the opportunity to discover you. And if you have 1 million impressions, maybe 100,000 people will discover you or that content. And then from that next funnel, you have to go down a further percentage of the people who discover you, how many people are going to follow, subscribe, or anything like that in order to return to your content in the future. That's going to be a smaller percentage. So if you got 1 million impressions, maybe you'll get 100,000 discoveries, maybe you'll get 10,000 captures. Now, that's kind of using a very large, big number, and then pretty sizable numbers on the big end. But one of the reasons that it's so hard for people to grow on Twitch is because they think that they're going to be able to grow just by streaming, right? But it's like, first of all, Twitch's systems, it doesn't have a good way to deliver impressions. And then even when somebody does happen to find their stream, I mean, the normal capture rate for really anything is around 2 to 3%. So if you're trying to get to 50 followers, for example, that means that you're going to have gotten to, well, probably 2,500 people or something will have to have seen your stream at some point and decided to, of that 2 to 3% are actually going to follow and be captured into the actual desired metric. Now, if you're thinking about like if you're streaming on Twitch as like a sub 10 viewer streamer, how many physical hours is it going to take for you to actually get 2,500 people to get eyeballs on your stream long enough to make a decision about whether or not they're going to be followed or captured? And this is why I kind of like this strategy for the lower ends, like the guy who is complaining with the workshop. Those individuals really do need to go for areas where they can get those, like they need to, and stop focusing on increasing the percentage of capture or discovery, need to really focus on getting a higher absolute number of impressions. Or once you're at my size, for example, I don't really care about Reddit promotion or anything like that because I need to start like YouTube is giving me the impressions. Like the reason why YouTube takes like 50% of my revenue is because what I'm essentially paying YouTube for isn't just the video hosting. That's a lie and a very large misunderstanding. What I am paying YouTube for is I am essentially leasing an audience that YouTube owns. Like I see your Nightbot thing in chat, SVB, how, it's like Twitch takes 50% for a very similar reason and Patreon takes 10%, right? But Patreon will give you a bit more access to your audience, whereas anybody who you drive to YouTube, you're not driving to your channel. You don't own that audience. You can't see their demographics. You can't contact them. YouTube could if they want to, but YouTube owns that audience, and that's what you're kind of paying for. So I pay that revenue cut to YouTube in order to get that higher amount of impressions, and it's my job to increase the percentage chance of somebody moving through the funnel.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Makes perfect sense.
I think also just going back to you saying what that workshop guy complained about people not playing his mode is, I think, most people aren't going to make money doing, YouTube, any sort of content anyway. Most people will probably fail, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I think people need, especially with the workshop, people need to kind of better think about how they see their workshop mode as a success. Like, I think a lot of the workshop creators in the community, they see if the entire customs games list is not full of my mode, it's a failure, But
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people play workshop stuff in private, with friends. Um, they might just check it out and have a look at it and say, "Oh, that's cool," but not play it immediately or whatever. And I think that's where if you want to get that sort of feeling of satisfaction of seeing like, oh, there's a bunch of, there's some number of people, or there's the impressions or whatever going up, is where you go to stuff like Twitter and Reddit and YouTube and whatever and post it there and promote it there. And I feel sorry for the people that do spend like the 50 hours and then get dissatisfied by not seeing the customs games list full of their mode, but that's just sort of how the workshop is for now. And hopefully with Overwatch 2, there is some changes, but really with the fact that there's one developer on it right now, and I know Blizzard is working hard on Overwatch 2, and like it's very hard for them to spend developer time on anything else other than Overwatch 2. Um, I'm not super optimistic when it comes to the sorry, not the long term health of the workshop, but the short term health when Overwatch 2 comes out. I think it will still be the same for a while, and then maybe once stuff is settled, people Blizzard will be like, okay, here's the thing that we have. What can we do with it? Can we, spend a little bit of time on it and get a lot of value out of it? Because I think there is a lot of value that can be taken out of the workshop, especially that, like you were saying, PVE content. Like if we can make custom PVE content in the workshop, like where it becomes its own real scripting thing, where you can basically make an Overwatch 2 campaign in the workshop, that's where it gets huge value. But that's an investment that Blizzard needs to make. And I mean, if anyone's been watching Blizzard employees' Twitters or anything, you can see that a lot of them are being laid off right now or
Mm.
being moved on. So, you know, what Blizzard wants to do with the workshop, I'm not really sure at this point. So we'll have to just see once Overwatch 2 comes out and if they want
Mhm.
to reinvest in it. But you know, you always want to be optimistic about things, but I have no reason to be overly optimistic right now about the long term health of the workshop, you know? And that's just
Yeah.
being real, rather than saying, "Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
for
like
sure.
oh yeah, workshop's gonna be great, it's gonna be amazing." But like,
Yeah,
I
it's a
can
real
kind of
shame.
see like the writing on the wall, and just the something that they have a long term plan for would have more investment in it now. I don't think
Mhm.
workshop needs to be a load of developers. It needs to be like it's always going to be a niche, but like you can kind of see that it's not their interest right now. You know.
Yeah, it's a shame because the potential for it is sort of limitless in a way. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not privy to what was the decision making, but certainly there's like 10 priorities, and it seems like the workshop is somewhere down the list. Same with like even right now, like engaging with the community seems quite far down the list.
Oh, it's
I'm
insane how low the engagement is with the community, Like, and I mean, part of that is definitely the layoffs, Like I think at the start of the year in was it 2020 or 20, there was some big layoff that happened, and I know like the European offices are closing down. I know that, for example, I follow the Russian community a bit. Their community lead or community manager is just gone. They just don't have one anymore. The Middle Eastern one is gone as well. So like, there's definitely be it the Activision part of Blizzard that we all love, is just looking at the costs and seeing like, okay, this for some reason is not giving us revenue, but they are cutting out part of the community, and I think that's a huge shame because a game like Overwatch, like there is so much community in it. Like there are these little subcultures like the fan fiction, the lore, the people who make art and all that stuff, and they're not getting the kind of views and like the support that I think they deserve. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, Fredo, I'd like to go over to you at this point because we've kind of talked on a lot of things since you last spoke. Do you have anything thoughts on either the Blizzard? Because the context of this as well, StarCraft 2 was now officially announced as like no more content, which is sad. But so there's something going on in the Blizzard office. So there's that you can talk about that if you want, or you can talk about what Jayne or feedback on what Jayne kind of spoke about with the funnel and the impressions and just generally being a content creator as someone who is again just really understands intricately the process behind being a full-time content creator.
Um, I had a coach reach out to me in terms of like wanting to work on content together, and I took a look at their content, and I'm like, yeah, I feel it was very obvious to me that they didn't understand the audience. Like it's an interesting thing about making content for Overwatch or any game really, but just knowing the game isn't necessarily good enough. And I think people need to take a bigger investment into learning the community, which evolves over time. So as I said, now with the game kind of at the down point, you would assume possibly the lowest down point it might be in terms of player numbers, for a while anyway, with Overwatch 2 launching, it is the highest percentage of like core or hardcore type players, and that's just like a different type of viewer. So when I think about content, I'm only on YouTube, really. I mean, we tried Twitch for a while with mediocre success, but we're just better at YouTube, so we stay on there. But the reason why that's important is because the way YouTube suggests videos to viewers who are interested in a subject like Overwatch. So you need to know who's actively watching on the site for that game and who that person is, like demographically, or what they're likely interested in. And that's how you connect with them. So that's, I mean, really, it's sort of like what Jayne said, where it's like, well, this is advice I'd give professionally. And so like, here's the tidbit. And if you want more, hire me. Right? Kind of, you know what I mean? So it's like, I could give you a whole lecture on stuff and mistakes I see people making or not adapting to the changing times where, I can speak for hours on that. But to some degree, I'm not worried about giving advice because you can give it and it just, it's the same thing with ranked, right? It's like, use high ground. Okay, I'm here. Now what? Like it's, there's 100 other things you need to know first. So I can say relate to the audience, but that it doesn't mean people are going to immediately grasp what that means or understand the level of work that I put in order to try to do that and actively keep up and evolve with that over time. Your Overwatch is kind of interesting because like we've changed the core content we make with the time. Whereas like early on in the game, it's like a lot of list videos. The thing that stayed concurrent through is like our guide content, but there was also like we'd have like 7 to 10 videos. But as the game sort of aged, then obviously it's just me on the channel, partially because the other two can't stand playing ranked, so even worse than me. So that makes it difficult to make content if you just can't stand the competitive experience of the game. It's something I really meant to bring up before when you were talking about this, and it's sort of to this point where, like, we say we're underserving the casual viewer base somewhat, and maybe that's true, but the problem is I don't see players that just play quick play, for example, succeed much on Twitch. Whereas I feel this is sort of my point when I say the active viewership is somewhat hardcore, where I see a guy on our YouTube side of things over here, like I see a guy like Jake make a breakdown of Ons or Smurf and just like break down each play and 100,000 views on that. And I'm like, well, like this is one of the most viewed videos for Overwatch in the past month. So like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, people try to make casual content, but I don't know necessarily if I wouldn't be the one to know how to make that translate necessarily, other than beyond what I've already done, obviously. But like I don't know how to push it more. So like I'm doing the most hardcore content now. I feel like like things that have been on my to-do list, I'm like, well, the viewers aren't really here, so I might as well spend ungodly amounts of hours doing stuff that I would like to make that I think would do a lot of benefit. That's where my head's at anyway right now. Whereas when Overwatch 2 comes, we plan to go back to like launch time Overwatch with a better mix of the content we produce. So you can expect that. But yeah, I said a bunch of stuff there. I can't remember if I made my full point. Oh yeah, what I was gonna say is, for example, I mean the two ways I play Overwatch is I attempt to play ranked and then get sick of it and then mostly play quick play. In between times, maybe the cool thing about quick play, I feel like I can play it a bit or for a while. But I don't think people would necessarily watch me stream quick play, or anybody for that matter. Like there just doesn't seem to be the tension there for the reward. Whereas if my friend PvP, he plays Junkrat 2 and he's in top 500. Why are you going to watch Freedo clown in quick play? It just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like as a product to me. So yeah,
it's kind of like a movie where it's like if the movie doesn't have stakes, then you kind of lose interest in the narrative, right? It's like,
but if we get tournaments and we're like, all right, us four, we're widely different skill ranges, whatever, and then we're all interacting. Like I think that's that's what I want to see. Like I definitely want to be involved in that. That sounds great. But until it's like a thing that's accepted in the community, I just sort of focus my attention towards other things.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the funny thing is that, you know, when you see like, and I think Jake's videos are fantastic. I watch a lot of them and I learn a lot from them. But when you see like, yeah, when he gets like so many views, for example, you realize that there is 100,000 people watching and wanting to know about top tier gameplay and how it's broken down. And yet sometimes we don't, again, it goes back to the idea of like the silent community where we don't necessarily see them around as much as we like. If you know, again, you think like 100,000 people just watch this one video on YouTube that's like in very, you know, intricate detail breaking this down. Why aren't there like, again, to use Jayne's funnel model, why aren't there like 500,000 people watching some less intricate content on education, or like a million people watching casual content or whatever? It's like, but again, like you said, it's because it's been trickled down and condensed into the more hardcore stuff. So the 100,000 are probably a larger percentage than they otherwise might have been as a piece of the pie.
Yeah, and one of the other questions there is that, like, if a video gets 100,000 views, you only really need to get a video, and Freedo might argue this point, but the metric that we usually use is that if you can produce a video that gets 25,000 views and you can do that consistently, that's kind of the threshold for what you can do to either do it full time or do it as part of a project or a business or something like that. So if you see a video having like 100,000 views, you know, that's 100,000 people who are interested in that video. It's not like you have to find 100,000 different people to watch the next video. If you can create a series that it gets 100,000 views on each and every single video on YouTube, that's enough to like hire a full-time editor and really go at that. So even though we have these very successful models of what we can make as content and could sustain somebody producing it full time, the question here is kind of like, why isn't anybody producing that content full time?
It's hard. It's not easy.
That's definitely the TLDR of it.
Yeah,
Like for
especially the content I make is not easy to make. I'm just gonna be real about it. I mean, so it takes the return on investment for my time is just, especially on like these videos I'm talking about that are going to be long epics, like it's just not worth the hours I'm putting into it technically, but I can justify it because it's on the Your Overwatch channel, and then I can reference it in the future, and can get views over time. Like I don't operate on this time crunch thing because, you know, I don't feel the need to. Also, I think some people don't realize as well, and this is at least the way we view it, but uploading bad content hurts your channel far more than not uploading. Which is why it's kind of important to have a very reliable thing you can make. And I wouldn't necessarily advise people to try to copy the Overwatch model, because then like I've built a quality standard that is just so difficult for me to operate under, and I just have to suck it up and take a lot of caffeine in order to put in the sweat equity, so to speak, in order to you know, not let my viewers down. So you know, there's a lot of positives, obviously, but like, you know, first world problems. But you know, being good's important, is my point.
And I was tweeting about this the other day, but I was kind of complaining that after all my kind of work into content strategy and like how you could do that best, there is really nothing better than just streaming and being a personality themselves. You know, if you can be a good player or something like that, sure. But especially when you can just stream for 1 hour and not only have that be 1 hour of streaming content, but also, I mean, pretty close to 1 hour of YouTube content. But like, that's an absolute ridiculous return on investment sort of thing. Whereas if like you try and make something on the production value of what Freedo does, and it does take a large amount of time. And I think that especially just Freedo's presence in the space, when you think about how long somebody's going to have to, you know, put in, I really like that term, sweat equity, in order to kind of become established presence, you know, the financial model probably barely makes sense for you, Freedo, and you are getting 100,000 views on every single video. So that is going to, at least kind of outside of a pure pursuit of passion and sheer force of will, I don't think that anyone's really going to be able to compete with you in that regard.
I agree. I think, and this is somewhere I can chime in as someone as in the on the field of not making enough money on YouTube. Here's an expert. Well, like to kind of touch Freedo's point, like I've gone through the same thing where I've tried to, like, you know, in the past make like really like hardcore content, and even take like, I think an example I can give is the essential tips video I did for Blizzard. It took me like dozens of hours of like to make that. It was like it's a 12-minute video, right? It's 12-minute video. Yeah. Explaining some of the most basic principles of Overwatch, but to get it, but I really, because it was commissioned by Blizzard, this was my first collaboration with Blizzard, I was like, I really wanted to look cinematic. I really wanted to look like beautiful and perfect and like all the details to be right. You know, it took like dozens of hours of filming, first of all, then dozens of hours of editing on top of that. And you know, all that like, and then, you know, post-production stuff like with, you know, all the getting the text right and all that stuff that goes into it for a 12-minute video. And I imagine that was a 30-minute video. Like I've seen some of Freedo's recent like Reinhardt guys, and as someone who content creates, I understand. Like I think people might watch it and be like, yeah, it's fine, like it's good. Like they might watch a video like that and be like, yeah, it's good, it was informative. But I think content creators, we understand like, okay, so that's like a half an hour video that took like 50 hours to make, like because it's just this sheer amount of time it takes to record all the footage, watch it, condense it, edit it, make it look good. And for that Blizzard Essential Tips video, I got like what 30,000 views, something, which is like on the higher end of some of the recent videos I posted. And it's like, if it wasn't that Blizzard didn't, if Blizzard didn't pay me for that video, it would have been completely a waste of time. Like it would be like several weeks of like other content I could have made in favor of a video that barely gets, like from YouTube itself, it would get like, I don't know, 50 pounds or something. So it's just like completely, and even like, you know, the video essay I made as well, which I like poured my heart and sweat into, like it doesn't pop compared to some of the other content, which I'm not complaining. None of this is like a complaint. I'm not sitting here to be like, reality, why doesn't YouTube pay me more? Like I'm happy with the way things are. Like I'm on the more privileged side of things. Like that, I still get to make content and have fun, and I have a job that like allows me to continue to do so. But that's the reality for like anyone watching who's like, I could be a YouTube star, or I could make like Twitch content. It's like there's a catch-22 where you really like the real big issue from the way I see it is to have enough time to make Twitch or YouTube content. You have to have some other source of income already sustaining you before you can put enough hours in to actually make it on YouTube or Twitch. Or you have to have like crazy levels of dedication and passion where you're working a 9 to 5 and then you come back home and then you spend 5 hours like streaming or making YouTube content and you get no sleep and you have no social life. So it's just like, unfortunately, the way the model works is just it doesn't have the return on investment. And Andy knows this too. That's why he's shaking his head.
Yeah, no, for me, from my perspective, it's like I'm fairly sure there's and you know, maybe Jayne and Freedo disagree, but I'm fairly sure there's probably a niche there for workshop content. Like I don't think I'd be getting, you know, 100,000 views or anything, but I think there's enough interest there. You know, I think people, when you present the workshop well enough, I think people are interested in it. It's just presenting it well. Like I have a lot of ideas on videos, like long form content I could do, and Jesus Christ, the amount of work that would go into making that would not make it worth it at all. Like I still want to do it because he said like it is a passion thing for me, and I'm very interested in doing it. But it's absolutely not worth the time investment, I think, you know, and especially from my point of view where there's zero revenue at all. Oh, there goes.
We lost Jayne again. It happens
But
once
yeah,
more.
especially where there's zero revenue at all, like putting the amount of hours in to make it like a 10-minute workshop video, it it's just so hard to justify, you know.
My friend
that's why-
Nathan,
yeah, go ahead.
at the peak of it, at the peak of workshop, did very well, making a lot of fun workshop videos. But I think that truly was a casual audience in terms of like they were tuning in for the new thing, and then you sort of got a taste of what the workshop could do, and you know they're playing Fortnite now again or whatever, right? So unfortunately, there isn't masses that. It would take a special kind of creator. Like I almost wonder if it would work better as like a Twitch stream thing.
Well,
You know,
I mean, there was
if
Darwin
Jayne
doing
could clone
Twitch.
himself and be like dedicated to the workshop, what could Jayne do? Because
Well,
again, like I feel Jayne came into the Twitch streaming space and just made his own product, like all of a sudden out of nowhere. Because in no way would I have guessed that Jayne's product would have worked before he made it, right? Like because no one was trying it. They thought there was one route that you go, you're sick, and you're basically a pro, and you stream. And then Jayne came in making all these other like series ideas, and he's sitting behind the desk with his green screen, and he's got like a show and interviews. I mean, it's like late night with Jayne in the Overwatch universe, right? So I wonder if someone, if they dedicated to that persona of like, I'm the fun content creator, let's go. Like that ain't gonna be me because I'm just a nerd. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
That's the perfect segue, and I've been kind of like waiting for the opportunity to jump in here. But my most recent kind of attempt at doing that, like really pushing everything that I'd learned and making it all into one show, which I was calling the Jayne Show, which it was basically like a TV channel where there were supposed to be 6 to 8 basically episodes or segments, as we were calling them, that I did during one show. And it was like, it had a pre-show, a post-show, it had guests, it had all these different segments and things like that. And it was a very large amount of work, not just to plan, but it was also 4 paid staff members helping it out with like logistical challenges, some programming challenges. And it was pretty successful. It's like the content on YouTube was pretty good. It got some decent views. The content on Twitch, it had some decent views. People were looking forward to it. But it was not like, I think that one of the things that was really like disappointing to me is that the effort didn't correlate to the success. And I think that this is something that every content creator will know and like really have internalized, is that effort does not equal success.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely ringing true in the fact that if I played Overwatch for like 8 hours, it would correlate to the same amount of revenue as if I did my huge production show. Now, obviously, there's some confounding factors here. Like, some people will support the channel or watch it on days when the show is not happening because the show exists and sort of thing. But, when I was talking about, like, I'm sure I have done multiple times attempted to create some sort of structure and looked at the financial models of making YouTube videos the way you do, Freedo. We've tried it on Elo Hell a couple times to limited success. And it, like,
You should have called me. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, man.
Could have given you a pointer or two.
But my point being that it always comes back to the fact where that kind of parasocial content, where it's just like, I am just being me. There's no prep time required before it. I can just, like, the optimal strategy for being a content creator, at least in terms of revenue and really viewership, is summarized by just go live, right? So you have to be live, people interacting with you being a regular and relatable presence. And if you did that around, like the workshop, as long as there was something that you could do for like that 6 to 8 hours, that becomes basically the subtext. And really, I think that the way social media is going just overall, outside of just esports, outside of just gaming, just in general, is that social media is really just going to this social connection, relatability, and parasociality. And I mean, especially when you're looking at kind of video content, trying to actually make high quality video content. I don't know what the hour ratio is between like what, like, SVB, how many hours you put into making that 12-minute videos versus, how many quote unquote hours you got, even if it'd be like a fraction or something like that. But comparing that to something where it's like requires no planning, you just go live because the content is yourself and the flavor of it is whatever subculture or subtext you have to the content. And then not only do you get kind of like a 1-to-1 content ratio, but you can diversify that. You can have that content be on Twitch. You can put it on YouTube afterwards. Clips, like ML7 does a great job of this. He does some of his stuff on Instagram where his 1 hour of effort actually doesn't just relate to 1 hour of content. It relates to like 3 hours of content across all the different platforms or things like that. And that's where this stuff goes, and why I think that it's like trying to make quality content is not just difficult, it's actively incentivized against.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it becomes a snowball, an exponential thing. Like, the nature of Twitch itself obviously is a very feast or famine thing, where it's like, if you are ML7, you have a brand as ML7, and then when your 2,000 viewers average on Twitch will also give you enough exposure that just a video of you playing and highlights of you playing, or like ML7 gets 10 sleep darts on this one map, will then get you like 100,000 views on YouTube. And again, like, the bigger you, it's this weird like self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, the bigger you get, then you can be a bit more lazy with your content. But of course, to get big, you can have to have good content that people want to watch. And again, this is kind of like personally why I try to push the like Patreon model to whoever does support me, because it's like, to make content that's beyond just go live and just be you need to have some sort of stability of like knowing that you'll still get income if your particular video doesn't pop. So again, like from my perspective, it's like, I would love to make, all the like hard work kind of videos that kind of Freedo's putting out right now, where it's like, you spend a lot of time, you really work it out, you make it a proper narrative. But then if that video doesn't do well that 1 month and doesn't earn enough income for like the 1 month, you're screwed. So it's like having some sort of backup, some sort of security model. That's why I like the Patreon model. I know, Jayne, we kind of have spoken about this off stream, about like having some sort of direct revenue model where your people who follow you will constantly pay you in a way, or like
Mhm.
that's the idea what a patron is, right? Like going back to the Renaissance times of like,
Patron of the arts.
yeah, exactly. A patron would just like be like, hey, Michelangelo, I like you, so here's some money and go make some art for me. And that's kind of like
Yeah.
a more crowdsourced model now.
And like one of the things I think that like there's so much content that is out there for free. I think that one of the real key insights here is that people aren't really paying for the content that you make. They're paying in order to support you. And one of the beyond just the parasociality and the relatability things, like I think that just as a core human emotion, gratitude and companionship are so powerful. Where, like gratitude it has a lot of psychological benefits, but when somebody kind of supports you or something, they feel good if you are grateful for their support and there is that kind of shared sense of companionship. So, at least in my opinion, when people do these kind of supporting the streamer thing, it is based off of this more individual relatability and connection through gratitude, compassion, and companionship. And I think that if you are going to actually kind of maximize that type of revenue, you need to be making content that is basically like a gratitude and compassion farm. And that, like, I just say that sentence and I want to vomit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
know
have
it's exactly
problems
what you
making
mean.
tournaments using volunteer ethics, but if I really want to be successful, not only is it go live, but it's go live, pretend to be everybody's friend, and then over exaggerate the amount of compassion, cry because my audience supports and makes this lifestyle possible in order to farm more revenue and support. Like if you're talking about what is the absolutely most ideal form of content, just from like a
The word
pure
cynical,
megacorp,
Jane. Cynical is the
it's
word.
a
Sorry.
corporate hellscape of a future. And like you're already, this is kind of when I look at like virtual influencers, which is like, Andy's obviously using a VTuber avatar or something like, but what happens when corporations get a hold of VTubers and they can construct the kind of content that I just described en masse, specifically tailored for people, not just within the Overwatch community, but in any sort of community at all. And you're seeing this sort of thing with KDA, where you're like corporations will see that you can just like flip this switch in a person's brain in order to give them gratitude and compassion emotions, which are very powerful emotions, in return for money. And that scares me. But
Didn't we have that incident with the League of Legends character? I only vaguely kept up with this, but there was like something, and
yes,
someone
that's
who
exactly
knows
what I was
more.
referring to.
Yeah,
Seraphine.
Seraphine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you elaborate? Because I only, so my perception was they had this character, then they decided to make like an account for her and make her like a real person, and then they actually gave her like mental health issues that they exploited for like clout, essentially. If that's my my like distant summary.
This could be let me think about how I want to present that, because it's a big topic.
Okay. Okay, I'll give you a second. But yeah, chat. So to try and Freedo, Andy, do you have any thoughts on that before we kind of let Jayne come out with it?
I think the most disturbing thing with that Seraphine thing is the fact that somebody modeled a baby version of Seraphine. Like, not only do they have that whole like backstory of she's this Instagram thing and she exists in reality. It's like she has like somebody went and actually modeled her as a baby just for an Instagram picture to make her more human and relatable. Like that's that corporate
Well,
like Jesus Christ, exploitation
Mhm.
to the max almost.
Jayne?
Have you seen the Genius video with one of the artists from KDA?
No. Is it
Apparently
short enough to pull up on stream?
I think that it's short enough that people should watch it.
Okay.
So Genius is a company that does like they have song lyrics and breakdowns and descriptions, and they do interviews with artists. But they did an interview
Oh
with one
yeah,
of the
yeah.
KDA artists. I think it was Akali. So if you just search like Genius KDA, this video should pop out. It's like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And I think that it for most people this should just like it should make your skin crawl. But with Seraphine, I think that one of the most alarming things about Seraphine to me is that this was not just to introduce a new character. Like it was a skin for a character, pretty much, and the character itself was like copy pasted onto this character. It's all abilities that they had from other characters. There was nothing revolutionary, nothing new. It was not like they designed a new character and they wanted to advertise this new character. This was a marketing first approach. This was part of KDA. It is Riot very clearly going in these territories, going on to like some of the cultural phenomenons of K-pop, And it really is an exploitative marketing technique in order to try and make these people who, when we are in an era of isolation, not just because of the internet, but because of the additional problems of the pandemic, where a corporate, just a corporation uses their power not to try and help people who are isolated, but being like, oh, I'm really isolated too. You know what would make us less isolated and lonely? You giving me money. Right? So it's like,
We're all united in my bank account.
right? But it's just like panic, panic, panic. You know, I start to see kind of the incentives and where things are going to go in the future with influencers once. I mean, because it's one of the problems we see with like Overwatch League. You know, one of the problems with what happens with the Dallas Empire, right? You have Clayster, who is a massive figure, right? And then he got bought out, and when an esports team, for example, puts a lot of effort and resources into growing the personality of their player, somebody else can just be like, yoink my player, and then Clayster's popularity goes with him to wherever his team goes next. And the same things happens with like content creators. Is that I'm sure it's I'm sure I know that my relationship or any content creator's relationship with an organization, whether it was like Emong working for the Philadelphia Fusion, Fran working for the Atlanta Reign, myself for the Dallas Fuel, assuming that we were just content creators, right? If they put too much effort into promoting us and growing us, like the IP or the likeness is not owned by the company that's putting in the effort in order to grow that and trying to get some returns. Because as soon as that person becomes large enough, like my likeness and my IP are owned by me. But combine this problem of like gratitude and compassion farming being the highest revenue streams for influencers, and have the problem that corporations cannot own the things that generate that, and corporations will find a way to own the IP and likeness of somebody who is relatable, compassionate, and will show gratitude in order to be supported. And I think that's a real scary thing. If I'm looking forward to like the dystopian hellscape of the future, that's kind of one of the things that we're getting into like real mopey territory. But but I am kind of alarmed by this sort of thing where it does give the power to corporations to own brands, likenesses, and IP.
Are you guys familiar with the TV show Black Mirror?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's a Miley Cyrus episode that's like basically everything that you're saying. Not the most well-received episode by the diehard
I
fans.
loved it.
It's a little
It was a good
polished.
one.
I loved it, but it's exactly the things you're talking about. I was just thinking of, it's like they have her in a, spoilers, I guess. They have her in a coma and have a hologram of her instead. It's like, oh, and then we can scale her up. So like everyone gets the perfect experience every time. Yeah, there's something inherently disgusting of the turning the human connection into a commodity. So, but alas, that's where we're at. And the interesting thing that I thought of when you said that, when you're like, it's not like companies haven't always tried to do this, because I mean, the beginning of Hollywood, it's like an actor was on you were attached to a production house basically, and them being independent came later. But with social media, the eyeballs are what matter, and it's sort of what you're saying, where like the popularity follows you on social media. So it's very difficult, and there's like no contracts that exist. They try to sometimes, where it's like, oh, I own your YouTube channel now. It's like, well, that's quite a hefty price if you're asking
YouTube
to
owns
do
my
that.
YouTube channel. It's not even mine to give away,
Yeah.
right? Oh wow, what was I gonna say? Dang. Oof,
Well, I'll let you gather. I was gonna say, like, I mean, that even goes beyond, like, that's kind of, it's almost an instinct as old as time of like trying to exploit someone's person. Because if you think about like posthumous work, right, that's another kind of older example of like someone dies and you take all their body work that they didn't opt to put out, and you put it out on their behalf and you make money, like, or their estate makes money, or and again, music artists is another example you can think of this, where it's like they're particularly true for this, where Michael Jackson dies and they're still putting out albums like 15 years later or something, and like you get a Drake feature on it or something like that, and it's somehow this weird perversion of what once was the person. Or you get a Tupac hologram and he gets to parade around in Coachella, and now you're exploiting any positive emotions from a man who died at a young age, and exploiting that so that the record label who owns his CDs now makes more money of his death than perhaps they ever did from his life. So it's like it's almost an instinct as old as time to kind of exploit life, I suppose, for money. But now it's like now we're actually birthing life in a way
Yeah.
to then
Right.
exploit it for money it never kind of actually generated until you concocted it.
The thing that I was going to add on, it's a little bit of a departure from what you were currently saying, SVB, which I just wanted to track back and add it on, is that when I've been kind of talking about these incentives and around kind of the advertising incentive, everybody takes a cut, like YouTube has a 50% cut of the revenue, everything like that. But going back to the financial model that Freedo was talking about making these videos, is that I'm not sure how many videos or views you get a month, Freedo, but if I'm putting a video out every single day and it's like my more popular content, I'll get around like 3 million views in a month, right? But when you think about 3 million views, that's like, it's like 1% of the population of America has to have watched my videos in order for me to actually earn some sort of, like enough revenue in order to keep doing that. And I think that is kind of a scary thing to contemplate in its own right, in the fact that we're talking about how it is incentivized for content creators to put 1 hour of effort in to make 1 hour of content, but that 1 hour of content is consumed by, let's say, 100,000 people. So your kind of 1 hour of content, which doesn't really have any quality or extra work to it, is consuming, if you will, 100,000 man hours from the economy, specifically in attention. And I think that that's one of the easier ways where it in an ideal world, SVB, it should be such that you need to put in like 20, 30, 40 hours of effort to make sure that kind of 1 hour that you are providing or consuming from the attention economy is actually of utility to the people who are consuming it.
Yeah.
But again, it's not incentivized in such a way.
Well, again, yeah, like value economics, right? Like certain professions that not to stray too much. It's like certain professions that you might argue like actually just take away human hours and human like output for very little. I suppose we're getting into real like Das Kapital kind of like area of like like you put out hours and it doesn't actually contribute to society, like draining and exploiting.
Torbjorn here says eat the rich. That's just my input there. And also check out the Blizzard store with coupon code /Torbjorn.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, have you got anything to say? Because I know, sorry, we've kind of ranked philosophical.
It's super interesting to hear about. The thing about the 2-pack and people's images being used, I quite like just Terry Pratchett, the author. He had a great thing on that. He instructed I can't remember, it was another author, Neil Gaiman, I think.
Yep.
He instructed him to run over his old hard drive with all his unfinished works with a bulldozer, so that nobody could ever do that to him. Which I think is just great. Absolutely great that he managed to do that. There's no relevance to that really. I just thought Terry Pratchett is a great guy, and just figured any chance to talk about him is great.
Yeah, but I mean that's kind of the thing though. It's like you can be exploited even after death, so don't worry, it's coming for you. The capitalism trade is coming for you. Not that we're like, none of this is some sort of like propaganda for anti-capitalism riots, but just something to think about, I suppose. Freedo, you got any thoughts on like the whole train we went down?
I mean, the thing is, the way I always looked at it is that doing content is a dream job. So that's how I justify the ungodly work conditions I put under myself. I always like to say my boss is an asshole, which is totally true, and he overworks me all the time. But that's just sort of the way I see it. So I mean, everything Jayne says is completely right. If this return on investment for your time for streaming, also because I think mainly because there's a culture of paying extra to show the gratitude and stuff on Twitch. That is really the thing that changes it. Because if I could easily turn that on for YouTube and not feel like I'm exploiting people, then I think I could turn that corner.
Yeah.
But either way, like I'm doing this full time, and that's just like a blessing. So I don't know. Like I don't really have much more to say, I guess.
And I don't think that the people who are doing that are all exploiting them. I definitely think that there are, when you're a content creator, I think that it's easier to spot the people who ham it up or pretend. You spot them and it's just like something feels off about it. But then there are some people, like I remember I was watching a video about Jacksepticeye, and I think that there are a certain portion of the world content creators, the people who are uniquely gifted to have their motivation be the validation of others, and they are, they really do feel those feelings of gratitude and companionship so very strongly with their audience. It's like everyone talks about parasociality being a one-way street between the audience and the creator, where the creator has kind of like these friends offline. But I think that there are some creators who get and are driven by the validation of an audience and really do feel like they are friends with their audience. So I think that there are some people who, and those kind of individuals like Jacksepticeye, I think are uniquely blessed to just be perfectly suited for this kind of content creation, but they are not everyone.
The thing I'll say about our content is that, so when I would say like, oh, that guide wasn't worth the time, I mainly mean if you were to look at it purely based on the hours work that required to make it. But with our goal with the channel was to build a hub, basically. So that means that the brand of your Overwatch is bigger because of that, and the respect of the viewer base is on a different level, because they just absorb content they love and they come back. Now it would be nice if it was more mainstream on YouTube for the like the join button to be a thing, but anytime I've attempted to play with that, I run into the fact that I'd love to give someone, like, I don't want to just take the money and not give something back, but then anything I do to give back takes time from me that I could be doing something else. And it's just like it that promotes, like, to me, a sort of a obligation feedback loop, where then I'm working for that money anyway. So it's like, I could have just been doing something else or having, time with my wife or something for once and forever. So that's why I haven't done that as much. Whereas on Twitch, it's like people don't really expect much for that. So I think on YouTube, the expectations are a bit different. But again, at some point, like, there's with the way progressive tax systems work, there are diminishing returns for like going super crazy. And that's where Jayne checks out. He's like, yeah,
Jayne's like, progressive tax? I'm out.
That was a well-timed departure from the call, Jayne.
Peace.
But yeah, so we've done other things with our time. We have other side projects we work on as a team. Other things we attempt. So that's sort of how we do that. Whereas with your Overwatch, I think it's safe to say, we have 800,000 subs now. Like, how long do you think it'll take to get a million? Will it be 1 year, 2 years? We started losing subs for the first time ever in like a couple months ago. Like, even when Overwatch was draining and a lot of channels were losing subs, we were still gaining. But due to barely uploading and a lot of other factors, we did start to lose subs. But I think when Overwatch 2 comes out, I'd expect those numbers to go up. So anyway, the sweat equity does buy something later. It builds the brand in such a way where, unfortunately, your Overwatch is a bit of a YouTube black hole for Overwatch, and that's not necessarily my goal. I just think you would have to be as insane and a maniac as I am in order to make this similar content, right? And that's sort of the wall I think people come up against, and they're like, well, I'd rather stream for 100 to 100 people rather than take the risk on the content like you guys are saying. When we started the channel, though, because we had 3 creators on it, we could task people with different, ideas and keep all things churning. So we just have more. We kind of brute forced it that way, and also improved our content massively as the years went on. So kind of a lot of general points there. I don't know if I have a concluding point necessarily, but
well, what I wanted to touch on there was something you mentioned earlier about the kind of giving something back to people who support you, because that also adds the moral dilemma of like the paywall, where you start having to almost paywall some of your content, where you're like, for example, take Patreon, where it's like, okay, someone gives me some amount of money on Patreon. Do I want to give them some sort of exclusive content in return? But now if I'm giving them exclusive content, then I'm also denying that content to other people who maybe don't have the financial means to support me, but are still supporting me and watch me every day and encourage me and give me, mental support and emotional support as much as anything else. And it doesn't always have to be financial support. And now I'm denying them of some sort of output that they should be privy. Exactly. All hail. So they, it's like, well, I don't want to exclude them, but then also I also want to incentivize people to give me Patreon money because I need to eat. So it's like, well, what do I give that's valuable enough? Because I don't want to just be ungrateful and be like, thanks for supporting me, chump, I'm off. So it's so that's an interesting
Yeah.
dichotomy as well, on top of everything else.
I think that that's another reason why the support structure is so big, because people support you, and then you can still maximize. When you're doing exclusive content, like how you actually figure that out from a proper business model perspective is you're balancing the funnel. Like if you're having all of your content public, it helps really with like impressions, discovery, and conversions. I mean, the initial conversion or capture, sorry. But what you're actually trying to do is monetize them later on. If you make exclusive content, you're kind of reducing the early, the early filter percentages and trying to increase the one that actually gets to monetization. And, this is kind of, if you are doing this strategy, this is something like Facebook did. Facebook did not monetize for a long time. And that allowed them to be kind of like cool. They didn't try and cash out early. They needed to keep that kind of inflow, the first layers of the filter, as strong as possible. And they did that by kind of like losing money. So if you are doing some sort of paywalled content or something like that, you need to basically do as little as possible in order to pay the bills, so that you can still have that higher funnel, because the funnel is still going to, we're not really, sweat equity isn't really the term here, but it is going to be paying off in future once you do kind of grow, and you can have that, the bottom layers of the filter are high enough that you can actually get that higher conversion rate later on. But when you are kind of doing the gratitude or the support model, I think that completely invalidates the need for that, because somebody is suddenly paying for everything that they already get, and you don't have to sacrifice those first layers of the filter. Going on with another thing as well, just around the subscription models, is that when you are using whether it's the join button on YouTube or the subscription button on Twitch, now this is going to be different from Patreon or whether you owned your own revenue stream, but one of the problems that I've really had is I've tried to do kind of like what Freedo mentioned, is that I was always uncomfortable about just getting money from people who wanted to support me. And like that, I still feel very uncomfortable with that. I'm still very uncomfortable with working with volunteers, or having volunteers work on a project that will earn me, like enrich me through some sort of financial benefit. But I mean, one of the problems is that if I say early on, like, hey, the subscription button is just enabled, right? Whatever. And then later I'm like, hey, if you subscribe to this, then, you'll get a coaching session or something, which is what I did really early on. Or if you subscribe, you can partake in Guess My SR. If you subscribe, you can do this sort of thing. Not only is that kind of, I'll explain this using an anecdote. There was a content creator, it's one of the case studies that I refer to a lot. There was a content creator on YouTube who did a lot of carpentry and would kind of like make desks or bookcases or things like that, all out of wood, beautiful, gorgeous stuff. And he didn't have a subscription button, but what he did is he sold kits or plans to make these desks or these bookcases that he designed on his own. But then he got popular enough that DeWalt, for example, decided to sponsor him, and not sponsor him with money, but just gave this carpenter tools, DeWalt tools. And then what happened is that even though DeWalt didn't give him any money for this sponsorship, he had these shiny new DeWalt tools, which he could use on his channel. The sales of these kits for bookshelves and tables dried up because people weren't buying them in order to actually build their own desks or bookshelves. They were buying them in order to support this carpenter content creator. So there's two additional problems here when you try and do the thing that I have done or Freedo has done, is that when you do start providing that service for the actual subscription button, what it does is it also crowds out through like a concept called basically motivation crowding, that the people who otherwise would have supported you for free, because they don't get that sense of gratitude and companionship, which they would have if they had done it and not gotten anything for it, those people will not support. So you're actually shooting yourself in the face if you try and provide something for that actual subscription, beyond the fact that if you ever try and change that, like, when I stopped offering coaching sessions for subscriptions because I had more subscriptions than I had hours in the week, what do those people do? Do they unsubscribe? What happens when I don't run Guess My SR for a week and somebody subscribed just to partake in Guess My SR? It also really does lock you in to a specific kind of content, and puts this kind of obligation, and again, more of the problems that Freedo was actually discussing.
Yeah,
that was a rant.
No, agreed. I'd also say it takes like effort and management and logistics and basically all the things that you said about like with running a tournament, but lesser so obviously for these kinds of things. But I think that's a hard thing for someone who isn't a creator to understand. Like, what percentage of my day thinking and responding to a message takes. Like even just planning a thing like that. Like there's only so many brain cells that I can devote to anything in general. So this is a thing that happens to me often in game as well. This is just like a side note, I guess. But like, due to like, there's like, trying to think of this. The Social Dilemma is a great documentary, by the way.
It
This
really
is
is.
like running through my mind. Everyone should watch it if you're even in the least bit interested in these kinds of things. But I think something that's going to happen as humans evolve over time is to learn how to like detach from social media. Like it's going to have to happen, otherwise we're all going to self-destruct and the world will end. But it's very, very difficult to do. But like when I play Overwatch, for example, people will type in general chat. I actually like I have this power to like read but not read at the same time, and this kind of goes with what I'm saying, where I only have so many brain cells to like absorb a thing. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they read a thing, read a tweet, read whatever, they like emotionally consume it as communication. Whereas if I were to do that all the time, it would just destroy me, and I'd get overwhelmed with the severity of it, I guess. So anyway, that like my point is getting away from these things is important to me. So even if I can put like, well, if I did all this work, then I can get X amount of dollars for it. I just sort of bypass that. And I'm trying to think of that famous writer that is a loner and sort of I can't remember what he wrote. Anyway. I had the name on the tip of my head, but anyway, like isolate yourself, and whatever, doesn't matter. Point is, on a hilltop, just creating like that. Like I that's my safe space for me to like put it all together, because otherwise the entire process of orchestrating these things can be a bit overwhelming, because it's what like a lot of creators I think do like hangouts and stuff like that. These things are difficult to provide. Even just meeting fans at BlizzCon or something. It's not everybody. Like I love it, but some people get drained by it. You can see. So right. On one hand, you got what Jayne's talking about, where it's like we want to give you that connection, but on the other hand, it's like especially with these extra incentives and monetary routes. At least I think a lot of people find it not necessarily worth it due to how much it costs. Also, at least for me, and it depends on other people's situations, but I don't necessarily feel the need to like have all the money. I have enough money is great, but there's diminishing returns to your happiness. I think studies have been done on this. I think the magical number, it's somewhere like either 70 to 100,000. I can't remember. Or maybe it's
70,000. Yeah, it is
70,000. I think is the number. Yeah.
Yep.
Because there's so many reasons for that as well. But in short, like your life doesn't get better the more money you get. In fact, in many ways, I was happier when I was poorer because I had more time, and I wasn't under these like conditions that I'm putting myself under. Right. So the grass isn't always greener, folks.
Freedo's rap album coming out now. I was happy when I was poorer. Like
more money, more problems.
More money, more problems. Exactly.
No. I mean, not people are in tough situations.
It makes sense what you're saying.
COVID. I'm very thankful that I have an occupation that isn't killed by COVID. Anyway, that's just sort of my point. Like I don't. When I see people that are like going above and beyond to try to maximize their revenue streams, I feel like an asshole trying to be like that, because I'm like, well, there's people out here who don't have jobs, and a lot of times I solve the problems by shutting up and just working harder. So that's my model, I guess.
Yeah. At the same time, one of the reasons that I do kind of pursue revenue has become alongside, obviously I'm very blessed to have the job that I do, and it's hard to even describe what I do anymore, really. But when back to like running those tournaments, right? It's like I'm not the only person who is passionate about this, and I think that if we do find some sort of way, like Elo Hell, I don't think people realize this, but Elo Hell has a staff team of about 230 people. It's a massive organization that does a lot of stuff that never kind of gets publicized. But through that, there are a lot of people who either get jobs in esports or get paying jobs just within that team. And I think that especially if we are going to find stability within this industry, if we consider it an industry rather than a community, we do have to have this more stable system, not just for professional players, but also for casters, but also for, tournament organizers and administrators. And it's like, one of the reasons that I'm kind of pursuing different ways of this revenue is because, like, we need to have this sort of revenue or just financial model that makes sense in order for these organizations or entities within the community to actually exist, be stable, and grow. The entire thing can't persist forever just on the blood, sweat, and tears of passionate individuals.
Yeah.
Fact. We could use more of you. I don't know if I have your management brain, basically. I meant to bring this up
I don't
sometime
think
in the
I have
call,
a management brain. I'm learning slowly, but working on it, right?
It always tickles me to sort of see the difference between me and you, Jayne, because I feel we're so stereotypical between the engineering and liberal arts side of school, because like I'm so hard in that like wacky creative side, and you're often so like intelligent, I guess, is for lack of a more descriptive term. But yeah, we just look at things differently.
Mechanical about it, kind of. Yeah, I think Jayne kind of unpicks stuff and looks at the larger kind of macro element of it. Yeah, trying to make sure that people who are actually passionate and volunteering actually get to sustain themselves, I think, is it's
a beautiful thing. It really is. If I were to do something like that, I would want it to be like that as well. And I've dreamt about it. I don't know if I have the ability to do it very well like you have. So, yeah.
Well, before
anybody's got some great ideas, I'm all ears. But
well, yeah, I'll send you a message afterwards. But Andy, you've been quiet for a while. Do you have anything to add?
I actually, unrelated to the content creation side of things, I relate with what you're saying, Jayne, about wanting to build a better system for yourself with regards to esports. Like, I don't think a lot of people might know. I mean, I'm definitely not a known face here in this call out of everyone, but I do a lot of stuff with the Irish Overwatch community because I see that as a pathway to, like here in Ireland, esports is not a thing. It's absolutely not a thing. It's a complete. Nobody makes money doing esports. You're laughed at if if you mention esports. It's just not a thing. It is so far away from anything that other countries have. And me personally, I see the sort of work. I'm only one person. I see the work that I do with regards to building up the Irish Overwatch community as what I can do to build the foundations towards someone else making money out of it, and like having a business structure. Um, because I think that if you want to see, like as you said, if you want the scene to be not just a community, to be an actual um, real thing that people can exist in and live in and really succeed, because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do off volunteers, and I'm very much aware of that, given that for the past like 3 years I've been running and building up the Irish Overwatch community. Volunteers are great, but you do definitely start to feel like you're exploiting people, and like you do wish that, like, oh, you see these people putting in a huge amount of hours, you want to make sure that they get paid. And it's such a difficult thing, especially in a country like Ireland where the esports infrastructure just is not there. Like, for example, for Team Ireland last year with the World Cup, um, we had to bring all of our players up to Northern Ireland, which is a separate country, because there is no place in the Republic of Ireland that has 12 PCs that are gaming quality to do a boot camp with. That's how far back we are, and I really want to do what I can, as I said, as one person with limited resources, to make it so that in 5-10 years, because we're far back compared to other countries, in 5 to 10 years, that somebody doesn't have to go and bring everyone up to the north of the country, or to a separate country, Northern Ireland, to get a boot camp going. I'm not really sure what the point here is. It's just more that hit me there, where you're saying you want to build something that's actually sustainable, not just something that lives off of a community feeling and volunteers and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think about a lot, is what I can do as one person. And I feel with what you're saying is that you know you can do more when you actually have a business built around it. You can do more than just if you're like, oh, I want to be happy, good feely, but sometimes you do need to actually make money out of it and build the systems for people to exist within it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I think that this is one of the frustrations that I have with the esports scene as a whole, including the Overwatch League, and the fact that a lot of the investors who have bought into the Overwatch League are kind of looking at the 5-10 year kind of prospect here, and that like they know that esports is going to be the next big thing, right? They know that whatever, it's the old saying that what we do on our weekends now is what we're going to be doing during the week in the next decade, sort of thing. And it's like I don't think anybody at this point is going to argue that esports is the future, whether it's on a computer, whether it's in VR, or whether it's Neuralink or some brain computer interfacing. Like, esports is the future, right? And these larger investment groups have kind of bought into this because like they know that it's going to be the next best thing, and now they own it, but they don't
Oh, that's Jayne.
That's a great freeze
They
frame.
they come in. The higher ups, they came to silence him. They must silence Jayne from telling the truth.
Oh man.
Conspiracy. They got him. Somebody check on Jayne to check he's still alive. Oh, okay. Well,
It'll just
we'll
be
have to-
Hastro sitting there when he comes back on, like Jayne is not
Be like,
represent the views.
unfortunately,
of NB.
Jayne was not feeling too well, so he's have to take his leave. And anything you heard him say was slander and lies.
This has been a truly cursed Discord call, I swear.
It
has
the
been.
most
It's almost-
unsuccessful connection
Exactly.
that
It's
we've
almost
had
like,
ever,
yeah,
actually.
It almost is a conspiracy. Like this information must not get out. Keep cutting. Keep cutting.
Honestly, it's
No.
been so interesting though, from my perspective, of someone who doesn't have that information. That all three of you. I know you're at different levels. SVB not necessarily as big as Jayne or Freedo yet. Yet definitely, but like the amount of insightful stuff that's been said here, like I really hope that people see this. Like I hope almost in a way people skip past a lot of the Overwatch stuff and listen to the content creation stuff that we're talking about, because I think it's a unique perspective that you don't hear very often. I don't think people talk that openly about the process of content creation and all the other stuff that goes into it. All the analytics and back end stuff that isn't talked about at all.
Well, again, there's like two funny elements to that. Is like the first element is the Overwatch talk is like the bait and switch, right? It's like I was really excited when Jayne kind of messaged me. He was like, "Let's talk content creation," because I was like, "Yeah, this will be great." But already, like as we were kind of approaching near the time of making this podcast, it was like, well, we have to give it an Overwatch spin, right? We have to give it like something to do with Overwatch, because again, it's like I'm ostensibly an Overwatch channel. We're all Overwatch content creators, and it's like, how do you get people to watch and not like lose interest if it's nothing to do with Overwatch? And then the other element is, again, is what kind of what Freedo and Jayne both alluded to, is information is kind of valuable, right? So why give? Oh, I went the wrong way. I should have kept this way. Why give information away when you can charge for it, or like when you might be part of your business to advise people, and if you're giving that advice out for free now, what's the point? It's again goes back to that same model of like, if you make content for free, it has certain benefits, but later down the line you can maybe exploit it. But now if you can't, what's the point? And also if everybody could be told how to make content, then the trick to making content goes away, I suppose. So not that I think any of us here would actively hoard the information. I think,
Well, here's the thing: there are no tricks. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Like, and all advice should be personalized as well. That's another thing. So, like, the advice I might give to you would be different to Andy, different to a pro coach entering the space, different to everybody, because the most important thing is that you connect to your audience and find them. And that's not the same for everybody. You're not, you might not be able to fulfill the promise. Like if someone were to copy the Your Overwatch brand, for example, well, they pretty
they have
obviously would be a budget version of it, right? Because they might have all the trimmings of like, oh, we do the same types of videos, but then you get there and it's just a different product, right? So really what you should do is try to find what you uniquely can connect to. So that's another, and in one hand, you're right, where it is valuable, but at the other hand, it's not valuable to anybody unless you adapt it. Think of it like this, right? Whenever you give advice to someone in ranked, they always misuse it first for a long time before they learn how to do it right. So the content creation is that like tenfold easily, because you have to learn your own voice and character and abilities and whatever to be able to reach your audience. So
yeah,
I don't know about Jayne, but I did content for years and years and years before we did it professionally for your Overwatch, and we didn't know we were going to be doing it professionally. We had just had years of experience, and I think I've told this story before on your show SVB at some point, but the three of us were friends and did content on our own played games together. So I saw this new game was coming out. Huge Blizzard fanboy, as many people know. And then I just gathered us together, like, let's take all the lessons we learned from YouTube and not make the mistakes of the people who came before us, and put our best foot forward. And then it grew to what it is today. So I think it's like, when you think, well, I'm going to emulate that. Well, can you emulate the years of experience we all have? Like, it just doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't work that way.
I think that rather content creation, I was more community creation. Like, I was never creating content, and Overwatch is the first FPS. Before that, I was in an MMO called EVE Online, and I was like a quote unquote content creator in that, because I was the one who was kind of like planning operations and events for things for the community within EVE Online to do. And then before that, I was the same sort of person who, in a youth program that I was a part of, was a kind of like a leader figure and would make events, extracurricular events, whether it was camping or marksmanship or drill or band or anything like that. So I think I'd always been around kind of like, getting the feel of how to lead and grow and create communities rather than content. And kind of my content has at least my successful content has been based around that. Whereas the times where I've actually tried to like really purely make content the same way that you do, Freedo, I still have a lot to learn and struggle with it at times. So
yeah, I would say the difference between the YouTube algorithm route and then your route is that you do have a community, whereas we try to detach almost our personalities from our brand as much as possible almost. So this is not advisable to anyone. It is a horrible idea, because it's so much easier to be a personality and be on Twitch. But what we are able to do then is flexibly change our content to the active viewership that exists, which is why over the years we've had so many different types of videos come and go, and will come again eventually, and how we've changed even and adapted them. So, like, for example, I think some people view your Overwatch as the Overwatch news channel, but is that like the speed at which we bring videos out, or is it the experience of collecting it all and it being the hub where we all get together to talk about it? I think that's where some people miss a trick, where they're like, early on in Overwatch's life, it definitely was valuable to be quicker on the draw. But as Overwatch has aged, the community now has a more laid back approach to it. Like, it's like, oh, new skin, winter event again, right? Like, there's these news items, but I'm not making videos about them because they're not significant. Instead, I try to bring those things together, make a significant video. Like, I want all our videos to feel significant, because I think it fits for the audience that exists right now. Whereas in Overwatch 2, there'll be a lot of our content, but other content as well, that like the interest and demand for content will be so high that a lot of things will get views that won't a year later, and you have to adapt that strategy. That's how YouTube works anyway, in my mind. And again, this is like, I can tell anybody this advice. That doesn't mean you can make the reads correctly. Me telling you need to read. It's just like in Overwatch, right? It's like, well, you need to read the ult status and the position of the team fight. But it's like, well, yeah, if I could do all that, I would be GM already, right? Like we all know we have to do these things somewhat. But yeah, so go ahead, creators, go out and go forth and spend 80 hours on a video that gets no views, and then learn these lessons the way I have, and then we'll build up your abilities as time goes on.
That's one of the things that I learned, whether it was making content and like concepts for content, like things like Guess My SR, right? Guess My SR, it's on the surface a very easy thing to copy. Many people have attempted. I mean, even Florida Mayhem is trying to do it right now. But it's like, if you don't have, I like to say that, ideas, in order to pull off an idea, you require actually the vision and the will sort of thing. So you have to know why the idea is good and what minor adjustments will you make to the idea that actually makes it shit. And then you actually have to have the will to go and do it. And a lot of people just don't. So you can share all these ideas as publicly as you want, but people just won't get it and won't be able to do it regardless. So,
well, again, the equivalent is like, when someone comes into your chat and it's like, hey, SVB, I'm plat, how do I get to master? It's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do. I don't, like, what was the advice going to help? Like, I could tell you, like, do this more, but maybe you already do that, and maybe your problem is that you overcompensate on that side. Like, I don't know. And I think
sorry, I just thought that was a genius way to say it. Like, the first thing people usually say to plats, right, is stop dying. So the first thing I'd say to content creators is stop making bad content. Great. That's really
Bye,
helpful.
man.
Thanks, Freedo. Appreciate it.
Big advice.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. In truth, the trick is just is to make what has your life has kind of enabled you to make, I guess, is that if I can sum up the kind of both the themes of what you guys are saying, is you took the experiences that you had in life and you put them into content creation. And I think, like, for example, as someone who is passionate about filmmaking and like writing films, it's like a sort of thing on the side that I really like to do. It's like it's the same thing where people always try to ask, like, how do I write like a great film? How do I become like a great writer? And it's like the greatest writers usually just figure out what it is that they're passionate about, what it is that they know, and they write about it. And it's like any writer could tell you, write like this, like write like Aaron Sorkin, or like, you know, write like XYZ the other. But it's like, if you don't have the skill set that that person had to write that script, what makes you think you could also write it? And if you have no knowledge about the things that they had knowledge about, why would you be able to write it? So why not write about the things that you know about? And similarly, why not make content about the things that you understand or you are passionate about? Because nobody can really tell you how to do that other than yourself. That would be my summary. Andy, what are your thoughts?
I'm just here as a sponge almost, you know, just taking in all this stuff. Like I'm loving this, you know. It's hard for me as, you know, the kind of content and the platforms that I ended up choosing um aren't as I suppose yeah, they're just not as big as like YouTube would be or anything like that. So it's hard for me to say much on this specifically. Like,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
important to note as well. I mean, when I did content for years, I think there's the thing that needs to be translated in that for almost no money.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So just doing it because you enjoy it, you know, is a completely valid path. And in fact, probably better for a lot of reasons because uh, Overwatch came out at the right place, right time. Like I wouldn't have been ready to make help make your Overwatch what it became 4 years before that in my life. Like I wasn't, whether it's graduating from university or the experience I had making my own YouTube content. The first YouTube video I made, I think, was StarCraft 2 on a channel that's long since been dead. And I wanted to make the voiceover comedy commentary videos that I saw so many people making that I really enjoyed. And I remember like I uploaded it and I'm like, why is it only on part of the screen? Like I didn't understand how aspect ratios worked or how to put things right. Like it's just like it functionally wasn't even a video, right? So like that's like the first barrier of entry. Just learning how to you know do the basics of content creation. And you know that was me years ago studying broadcast and English, which are like I would say
Very
maybe
well suited.
peripherally helpful, but not helpful with the new media stuff. Like this is a whole nother school of content, I guess, that has grown over time. Something I wanted to say earlier, actually, like Jayne was talking about brands eventually getting good at this. I do think that will happen. However, I don't think brands are very good at it now in general.
No,
like maybe
they're terrible at it now.
yeah, like nobody really. So this is the really interesting point where someone like Jayne or myself might be very valuable to these brands to consult because they go about it in all of the wrong marketing routes where they are the physical embodiment of the hello fellow kids meme. Like that's what they look like to the internet, where they're coming in like, oh, gaming, that's fun, isn't it? And everyone can tell it's phony and a sham and overproduced, and they pay too much for not actually the things that matter, and it's just all over the place. So there's going to be a revolution coming in this regard because there's no way people with this much money will not eventually get what they want, and it will happen. So brace yourselves, everyone. It's already kind of began with a lot of like TV shows and stuff moving on to YouTube, but it's going to get worse in terms of brands controlling it. Right now, brands like sponsor content more so, but soon they'll get into the ownership route where they're like, why not just have their own platforms and have their own Shrouds and Tim the Tatmans on their own you know, sites. They're trying to do that. You see this with like you know, the Twitch streams of different brands that are attempting to get people on them, but I would say it's rather ineffective now, but will soon conquer the world. Look out. The war of the worlds is coming.
In this case, the revolution will very much be televised.
Yes. It will be
Yeah,
streamed.
it will be streamlined. I'm pretty sure the U.S. Army have a Twitch channel, right? Like something like that. So it's like,
Yeah,
I mean,
they
that's a
do.
whole nother. That's a whole nother.
Good example.
But like, you know, it's like, hey, we're like, watch the army stream. Okay, but before they come blow up my house, I think to summarize, I think yes, even though I'm in no real position to advise anyone else on what to do, I think if you try to approach content creation without passion first, it's just like if your approach to content creation is I want to make content to make money, that's like the dumbest idea right now. I feel like just in the state that it is, because it's never gonna happen. Like it has to come from I think a state of like passion that stumbles into livelihood. That's my perspective, anyways.
Yeah, I love this point because I almost physically cannot accomplish anything else in life. Like I have done so many different things horribly. Like at one point I was a door-to-door office supply salesman and I was so horrible at this job. I cannot describe to you the levels of despair my life was in when I was attempting to do that or any other normal job. Like even whether I'm just bad at it or don't fit in those environments. Like it takes this very special, unique type of wacko, like crazy person in order to be even interesting enough to succeed on these platforms, but to be any good at them because the sort of mottos I've built that I say I live by, they don't really get rewarded in a corporate structure at all, which is also why they suck at coming into this space and trying to do things because there's so many layers of red tape or politics or whatever that hold them back from being successful. But eventually they'll begin to figure it out and at least lie well enough that to relate to these things. But like if you have a regular job and you're the best at your position, in many jobs, no one gives a shit. And in fact, you're just making everybody else look bad. Whereas on YouTube, it's like the exact opposite, where I can put infinite work into what I do, and it only helps, in the long term. It might not be worth it, like if you think of it hours per work, but I feel like that's because you're when you apply that, you're almost applying a that corporate model to it. Now, in some ways, that's helpful in order to like systemize it the way Jayne does, but in other ways, especially with YouTube, I feel it's a mistake because you're not realizing what you should be tracking metrics wise. Like the health of your channel is not the same thing as like how much time you put in or the views that got or whatever. It's your journey, I guess, and where that is taking your brand over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. And maybe to people who aren't content creators, it might not necessarily like, but yeah, there's a whole process to it. Jayne, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
I mean, I think that was interesting, kind of talking about not being able to do other things, or whether it was your job with like door-to-door salesman and things like that. I think that I'm very much the same sort of way, in where I'm really good, or sorry, I'm really bad at sticking on like one thing. I try and understand. I chase down, like if I notice I don't understand things, I obsess over that until I can at least find something that I'm like, yeah, this is kind of how that works. It might not be perfect, but it's good enough. So I think that content creation, when you like, in order to be a successful content creator, you do really need to be an entrepreneur. You need to solve all of the problems yourself. You need to have that more kind of holistic understanding of what you're doing. And like right now, I think that sales, marketing, and ironically, communication is one of the things that I'm weakest at. Like with the with the Jayne show, one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I made that show. I talked about it. It's once a week, 6 to 8 segments, right? And I thought that these segments, which, if I had continued it, I think that it would have eventually gotten to this point. But, each one of these segments were, repeatable, pretty easily, almost like Guess My SR. But the problem is that when I first came out with the show, it was like there were like 8 new ideas, and I hadn't communicated this on a YouTube video or a blog post. So I was trying to like communicate all of these really complex and nuanced and, I mean, hopefully elegant ideas. But especially in the Twitch setting, it's like when you have 300 viewers over the course of a stream, it's like it's a different 300 at the beginning, middle, and end. And then right after you explain something, somebody's going to tune in and be like, hey, can you explain what's going on? It's like, oh, it's never a perfect solution sort of thing, right? So, one of the it's like there's always something more that you could work on. It's never going to be good enough to just do the minimum viable product when it comes to content creation, and you really have to have something driving you in order to constantly be in a state where you don't know what the hell you're doing. It's different from going to university, getting a bachelor's, getting a master's, getting a PhD, becoming a professor. Like that might be hard, but there is a roadmap. You know what to do next. There is a curriculum, there is a syllabus, there is a progression. Whereas in content creation, you are just perpetually lost and you always feel like you have no idea what you're doing, right? It's just, it never changes, sort of thing. You have to kind of be okay with living in that uncertainty, and in like a perpetual state of ignorance and scope creep, really.
Well, what's that saying? It's like a piece of art is never complete; it's just abandoned. Right? That's
I've never heard it before, but I really like it.
yeah, that's kind of what content creation is. You can never make the perfect piece of content. You just stop trying to make it better and you just put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, this echoes with things that I say often. I always have a much harsher tone and almost comedic, insultingly, a way of describing these things. But when people ask me, how do I begin being a content creator? I tell them, don't. For all these reasons, because like it's like when people ask for advice, they're looking for that same kind of roadmap that exists, and you're trying to clock in, and that's not really the way to succeed. Actually, you have to like live it and just gain so many skills in it that it's like you can make a name for yourself. Whereas like when we're talking about like work, return on investment, if you're trying to decide like what path do I go down in life, you should always go the finance sector, or a trade or accounting or something that's like, here's a skill I can do for a business. Just do that, because that's so much easier than trying to be a content creator. And like I wouldn't like when I have children, I'm not going to be like, yeah, be in the entertainment industry. That's like the worst thing you could ever ask for them to do. Like, no, don't do that. Like you can do it. The best relationship you can have with it is the hobbyist level, because then you can tune in, tune out as much as you want, do other stuff on the side, and enjoy the process, and take a step back when you have to, instead of constantly reinventing yourself or improving, like Jayne's saying. Like our content as well, like it's developed so much over time, where if I go back to like a video, man, that first how to be a pro Genji guide, man, I have a lot of pride for that. Let me go back and watch oh my god, it's a piece of shit. Oh my god.
Oh, somebody recommended that I go watch my VOD reviews from 2 years ago. I was almost intolerable. It was so bad. I don't know how anybody watched me or just stood me back then, but it kind of makes me laugh. I'm starting to kind of appreciate the people who do a job that they can kind of stand and pays well, so that they can do what they like at the end of the day, because then the need to actually do that and get paid for it doesn't kind of corrupt their hobby. So I think that doing this stuff as a hobbyist is probably the healthiest way to approach it. But it's like whoever said the thing where it's like, do what you love for a living and you'll never work a day in your life. Like that's a complete fucking lie. It's do what you love for a living and you will never stop working until you die.
Actually, on that, like Freedo, like, I'm sure you've thought about it. How do you see like the long-term progression of, like, say, your channel, your career as a content creator? Because like right now, it's very much tied to Overwatch, and like hopefully Overwatch goes on forever. But if it doesn't, like, what's your sort of thought on that?
I love this question because it implicitly implies as if I had a plan or something like that. Like that,
I knew
that's
that
what's
was coming. I knew that was
hilarious
coming.
because I get this question often. It's sort of like, well, what are you going to do next? It's like, I don't know how I'm here. What are you talking about? Like
what do you mean next? I don't have a plan for tomorrow.
No, but we have a team, right? So like in the time that we've spent, me just being on the channel, we've been doing other things, trying out different stuff. We've got stuff cooking behind the scenes and next steps, and that's about as specific as I'd like to be about it.
Sure.
There's the what excites me now next is looking at things in more of the not direct content creation, but like the business sphere around it. I think that's like the final frontier of a content creator's evolution, unless you just become whoever, like the next big thing, XQC tomorrow or something like that. Then you can keep going. But I expect Overwatch at least to be great for another 1 to 3, maybe 5 years. But I mean, the truth is, the skills that we have to create YouTube content, we've already proven we can transfer it to other games. We've done it with other channels. We have to sort of ask ourselves, like, on what how much effort do we want to do that. Like, luckily we have the luxury now to do what we want, whereas I know a lot of creators, especially streamers, the worst, I feel for creators in this way, especially when I talk about ranked and rant about it, but the creator trap is like, I have enough stream followers and subscribers to earn a living doing this, but I have to play this game that I now hate. Like, that sucks. Luckily, there's benefits to the model that that we use, which, although it takes a lot of effort and maybe a very specific skill set that can almost guarantee success on some of this very difficult stuff. Because we can do other things with our time. Like I think earlier Jayne asked, like, monthly viewership and stuff. I think with your Overwatch, it makes more sense to think of like yearly viewership almost, because it biases up and down with the ebbs and flows of the community. Our channel anyway is more on that. Whereas if you're more of a personality, then you kind of want to keep a really nice, consistent, like, what are my bills going to be each month? But when you have more of a hub channel, I think you can flex up and down quite a bit, and overproduce. Our plan is to overproduce produce a lot anyway, when Overwatch 2 comes out, and then read the room, so to speak. That's why I don't produce tons of content now. Like, could I make more money specifically now if I kept making videos? But I want to specifically make sure not to make bad videos that aren't useful for the current time, and or anyway, I can't remember if I'm still on your question or not. What are my plans? Yeah, I try to multitask and diversify a little bit. I guess that's the answer. But the beautiful thing now, I think I do have life experience where, coming out of college, for example, with liberal arts degrees, it's possibly the worst thing you could ever do. Because it doesn't translate directly to any job. But now, okay, I ran this successful YouTube channel for 4 years, and I have the degrees, and I've done X, Y, and Z. Like that, I probably could get a real job at some point. Hopefully, you would think. When you're fresh out of school, like, you don't have anything on your resume really. It's like, I volunteered and whatever, cleaned up trash. It's like, yeah, the hell, that's useful to me. How? Whereas the skills I've created, I hope, translate to something next. But again, like, that uncertainty is just something you have to be willing to accept. Like, tomorrow it could be like, well, all gaming content is actually not technically fair use and it's all deleted. Like, you just sort of have to. That could happen. By the way,
yes, technically
we don't bring that up, but like, there is no legislation on content creation. The internet community just decided we're going to do it, and publishers were like, it probably costs too much to stop. So to be honest, because nobody's enacted on it, it would be very tough to make a copyright case on this sort of stuff. But that's another frontier that needs to be broached, because
that's the Google Stadia guy saying that.
I was gonna have a podcast on that. I wasn't able to organize. I was legit gonna have a talk about that. The Google Stadia guy.
I mean, he's not wrong. Like, people clowned on him, but he's not wrong.
Yeah, he has a point.
Because I studied broadcasting, I also had to study media law and stuff. And that's why Jayne's saying he's not wrong technically, but there is no legal precedent. So we're all operating into this massive gray area, essentially, all of it. Because it's like, well, is reaction videos okay? Is live streams okay? I think I would argue our content is so transformative that it could be okay. But for all I know, it could be deemed not applicable too. So yeah, that's another whole nother ball of wax. If in order to do this professionally anyway, you have to sort of just be willing to know that tomorrow your audience could be gone, or you could say something stupid on stream, and then all of a sudden everyone hates you the next day with how fickle everyone is in current year. So there's many routes to failure. So you just sort of have to be willing to know that you just keep moving forward anyway. I guess.
Yep.
I want to kind of co-opt Andy's question here into some semblance of direction, because I know we've gone on for a while, so I'm conscious of you guys. I mean, I could keep going, but I know you guys got days to go on with. So with Overwatch 2 on the somewhere horizon, how do we see the future of Overwatch 2 and future of Overwatch 2 content creation kind of panning out, and what do we even kind of think is going to happen?
Oh boy, who's taking this one?
I think Andy, why don't we start off with you first, because you haven't spoken in a while.
Yeah. Well, I was actually thinking, again, it's just I don't know why I'm asking Freedo so many questions, but thinking of like, surely Overwatch 2 for you and your Overwatch is a perfect opportunity to move into that personality-driven content where you don't have to spend, so much time because, like,
And
you're
you got to
playing.
have a personality to do personality content.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, of
you
course.
gotta,
Like that.
if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Yeah, where the content isn't necessarily about the game itself; it's about you experiencing the game and your reactions to it, that sort of stuff. That's what I mean by personality content. Of course, everyone has to have a fucking personality to to make YouTube stuff. But do you not see Overwatch 2 as an opportunity for that, where you can move into more like a let's play, whatever the term for it is in YouTube now, of watching someone play, because as far as I know, Overwatch 2 is going to be a lot of repeatable content, and maybe it'd be more like Destiny or something like that, where you can play it a bit more than you can like play ranked. You can't just play ranked forever; you go insane, as we've proven with Emong slowly going insane. Uh,
Poor Emon.
but yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
that's fairly long and going on. But yeah, but do you see Overwatch 2 as an opportunity to sort of change up the style of your content a lot, or are you going to keep on going with the sort of same stuff you have right now?
Well, I sort of said we're definitely not doing what we do now because the market will be very different then. So
Mhm.
regardless, there's going to be lots of other types of videos. What those will be, we're going to iterate on and try on. And I mean, who knows? It will depend on what the new content is as well.
Yeah.
So I guess the interesting thing about your question is that the approach to content that we have is quite different in that we're always looking for feedback to what the audience already wants and providing that. So it's like, am I going to try a thing that maybe people that either is easier to do or whatever? Like that's not even how I engineer how we create content, right? So
Right.
I think if you look at the landscape, the market for interest of this type of content now is a fairly set value. So the question would be, what is that worth the time to make, and does it detract from the brand of the channel? Because there's a lot of people who subscribe to your Overwatch that specifically enjoy that it isn't that, right? Where it's like, well, you're not just this thumbnail like every time, right? Like this, not to point fingers at Jayne or anything, but but whatever. Some people are subscribed because it's different. Basically, is the point. Like if they wanted that, we already got people who do that well. Is I guess the way I'm gonna just swing this one around. like if Jayne's making fun content, why do I got to make fun content that is just in that route, right? Like so that's the thing that you got to think about. Being unique has quite a large value, and even though it might be an easier route, I hope if I've expressed anything, the way that we've become successful is by taking the path less traveled, Robert Frost, and brute forcing with effort more so than doing things that are a bit easier. So there will be easier types of videos that will be successful then for sure, but it's just not the way I think about content, I guess. So maybe I'll try some of that stuff, see what we do. But I think here's a mistake I think people make in that question is that not everybody's that entertaining. Like I can listen to Jayne stream for hours and just be like, all right, I'm chilling with Jayne. He's got a good radio voice. Me, it might be a little bit more of a struggle for me because I want to go on too many tangents. And whereas if I can edit, then I can Freedo, from this timestamp to that timestamp in the recording, you weren't making any goddamn sense. So we're just going to delete all that and then compress it into the video. So that's the beauty of my content creation style, is that I can hone it and craft it into something better than I would be otherwise. So I don't know if that necessarily would. I think a lot of people force themselves down that route without actually being talented, I guess, frankly speaking. And that's not my aim. I hope
Jayne,
that
anything you
has
wanna add on
thoroughly exhausted that
Oh
question.
God, there's like 3 or 4. Do you want to just what was the original question that you asked Freedo? I'll
Am I
start
gonna
there.
try?
Yeah.
Because we could, I mean, there's like 3 or 4 things that Freedo said that I could just be like off, but we're you just brought in a new topic, so let's stick to that new topic. What was the original question?
How do you see the kind of Overwatch 2 and how it affecting future content creation, and what is going to come with it?
Well, I think that it's definitely, there's a lot of uncertainty around how much PvE is going to be. I think that we are very aware that there's going to be a lot of PvE content. And I think that one of the things that we talked about earlier on is the fact that there seems to be an absence of this casual fan base that actually has communities and content created for or about them. You know, it is very much kind of dominated by the competitive community, which, again, as we talked about earlier, kind of thinks that they are the majority of it. So I I think that if we are going to see kind of any forms of new content coming in, that it is going to be, they're probably going to be just emergent things that it's going to be really, really hard to predict. I'm hoping that Workshop finally hits critical mass where maybe we get our version of like Dota chess or something like that. I think that would be a really big moment. One of the things that I'm surprised it hasn't come up in the conversation yet is that Roblox is just filed for an IPO. They filed the S1 with the SEC, and Roblox is not a game that has a large amount of content creation that actually exists on social media. But looking at some of their numbers, the growth rates, the multiple billions of hours of playtime per month that is especially happening in this younger generation, Roblox is a massive kind of, and nobody's talking about it. But they're like the numbers are kind of looking them like it is going to be this next sort of Minecraft, and it is based off of these developer tools where it's much more of a sandbox where people can make their own games within Roblox as a more of like, it is kind of like their version of the Workshop, except it's a lot more advanced and developed and things like that. And I think
I'd say it's more close to something like Unreal Engine. To be honest, it's more of a platform than it is.
Yes,
Like
that's
Roblox
exactly the point. Is that it's
surpassed
more of a
game.
platform than a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that Workshop has the opportunity to be like, because imagine if you had, again, this like collective effort of the community being able to, like, if you really truly gave them tools in order to develop sort of things, and then you're seeing some of it in Minecraft, and you also see some of it in Roblox, where the developers of these Workshop things, like one of the things that they do is that you have the ability for people to actually like buy passes or buy the game. Or have like microtransactions and currencies within the games that you develop for Roblox. And this has turned it into this massive platform that, just like the App Store, it's like Google Play or Apple App Store, but put onto a platform for developing games made by like some professional developers, obviously, but it's even easy enough for children to make their own things. And this is like, again, nobody's talking about it because there's not a lot of content that gets made there. It's not like there is a centralized individual who creates content, but it is like, seriously, look up the S1 filing for Roblox going IPO and some of the VCs that are talking about it, and it will blow you away. So there is that kind of thing where we might move to much more of this decentralized content hubs that don't have these really public-facing streamers and figureheads and channels like we do currently with the Overwatch community. That might not necessarily be a bad thing. For the competitive side, obviously, I think that you're going to see an uptick. I mean, Overwatch originally for me, and I don't think a lot of people know this, is that I originally got into Overwatch because I was going to school for business and I was using Overwatch as like a case study for online communities, where I don't really care about Overwatch as the game. It is the community within Overwatch that I care about. And eventually after Overwatch 2, I'll probably pivot into something back towards like an MMO or something like that. But at least with my speciality in education and coaching content, I know for sure that like there is going to be people coming back to the game wanting to relearn it or wanting to learn it for the first time, and I'm going to be ready to provide those kind of content and hopefully services when it happens. But and then beyond that, like my new entity that I'm trying to build, like Metaverse Industries, I want to be able to help other content creators, regardless of their speciality, succeed in being able to actually support themselves, because I'm a huge advocate of kind of the network for effect. Like another person's popularity, this is something that always comes up when we talk about like e-girl streamers or something, and it's like this really cynical guy's like, "Meh," it's like all these women with all these viewers preventing me from being popular. It's like, it's the more people who are successful within a space, the easier it is to also become successful in like a social network or like this. One person's success does not preclude your own. It actually makes it easier because somebody else has already like done the trailblazing, being like, there is success here, right? And it's easier to kind of find around it because like the more content creators there are in a space, like the healthier everybody is. A rising tide raises all boats. So I want to make sure that other content creators, that I kind of reduce this barrier between casual content creator and professional content entrepreneur, if you want to kind of call it like that. So that was my tangent.
I agree with that
Andy,
completely. Also, I find it way more fun. Like when other people are making content, I get so bored feeling like I'm the only guy nerding out about the game. This is why, like, I was drew to SVB's content very easily. Like, I just want, there's no videos anybody else can make that's going to detract from what we've built, and it vice versa. That's just not the way content works. People get very insular and afraid, and about, there's loss aversion essentially is what it is. They feel like they've got something and they just can't give it away, but that's not the way it works. Like the way the viewers feel about your content is it's just not transferable. So sometimes you do see someone like cannibalize a bit, but I feel it's for the right reasons. And so as long as you improve with them. So like I think it was very fun for me when you were doing a lot of owl content, Jayne, because I felt like I had another peer in this. And I think I could, if I were to like analyze the numbers, I could see maybe like a bit of a drop in views when we would both make similar breakdowns of similar things. But ultimately, like it doesn't matter. It forced me to look and be like, all right, so how do I be a bit better and move forward? Like I just don't think of it in the loss aversion way, or because to some degree you got to be grateful for the audience you do have. Like if Jayne's just better than I am at this, well, let me just do something I'm good at. Like why do I got to worry about that's the way I think of it anyway.
Here's an example that's not competition. And I think that this is one of the things that was one of my first interactions with Kefri. And I think Kefri gets a bad rap for, I mean, some of it's deserved, some of it's not, and it's important to kind of view people with their goods and their bads and not in the binary, like you are good, you are bad sort of thing. But there was this narrative when Kefri joined contenders in the Pacific region to play, right? That became a pretty hot topic. And I did this like review of Kefri's Widowmaker. The question would be like, is Kefri a professional widow? And like, honestly, I don't think I was really in a good place to justify. Like at that point, I hadn't actually really studied professional Widowmaker anyway. So it was kind of like, let's just stretch this and trying to be like, yes, professional. But the thing is that like Kefri, for example, he did a response to that video, and then I responded to that video, and then he responded to that, and then it's like, so there was this one topic, right? People were interested in Kefri. Is Kefri a professional Widowmaker player, or Kefri playing in semi-professional Overwatch? And it's like, there is an audience for this topic, and the more content that's created about this topic, the larger that audience grows to. So like the first video got like 80,000 views, Kefri's response got 120,000, my response to that got 150,000. But we weren't competing each other. It was like the audience was being passed back and forth and back and forth. And just like I was talking about with Jake's videos earlier, if a video series gets 100,000, you don't need to have 700,000 people watching it to get 100,000 views, or sorry, that many views in a week. You just need 100,000 people watching 7 times. So like this narrative or this bubble around a piece of content existed, and between Kefri and our effort of basically hamming it up and playing that we were having this rival between somebody who was playing Widowmaker and somebody who was saying that, he needed to improve, he started to make like a gig out of that, doing on-stream stuff, referring to how I wasn't calling him being aggressive. So he was playing hyper aggressive in ranked. And it just like, it was really interesting working with another creator who actually kind of built this narrative around this series of videos. And that sort of thing can happen where it's like, if, it's where you have these narrative bubbles come up, or these kind of self-fulfilling prophecies. One of them could be the fact that, the game is shit, right? That is something that just becomes self-fulfilling almost. But, when you're looking at kind of the amount of people who are on Twitch watching Overwatch, that number is usually between like 15,000 and 20,000 people. And when somebody like DeFran goes live, for example, he'll bring 8,000 new people to the category. But even if all of the popular streamers are not streaming on the platform, there are still usually around 15 or 20,000 people who want to watch Overwatch or some type, and they will just watch the largest channels. And that's why when you see people like Flats, who normally has like 300 or 400 viewers in this kind of category, when nobody else is online, he can be at the 1,500. So it's like that audience is still there for that topic. And I think that like growing that audience for that topic through kind of quality gameplay, the higher dynamism, I guess, within a community really does benefit all creators within a subject.
I tend to agree, and I've seen many streamers go from where Flats is right now to, I mean, when Emong started, looked like the same kind of streamer to me. I think if Flats keeps working on it, he's going to embed himself in the community and be up there with the big guys as well. I feel like he's just getting started. So, and yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Like there's some sort of inevitability to this, right? Like when I first saw Jayne start streaming, I'm like, oh yeah, instantly got it, right? Obviously improved over time and everything, but anyway, it worked. I think a lot of people think of it in terms of like what people deserve or things like that, but it tends to flow the right direction. It tends to be fairly meritocracy based, I would say, thankfully. But and the way to gear your mindset for that is just to be prepared to just keep working at it and earn it, basically, and then you will, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have anything to add? I know you're kind of like me right now, where you're probably just listening and like nodding and,
Yeah.
understanding,
Yeah,
taking
no,
it in.
I'm pretty much listening in here at this point. You know, I'm like a viewer.
just orbiting
That's
the
so
corner.
funny, Andy, because it's like I know that you have some really interesting insights that I just like crave to hear you talk more about, like the niche of the community that you interact with, because it is rather opaque to me. So it's kind of
As
funny.
in
It's
the
like I
workshop
just
side of the
like crave
community,
your
or
insight, and you're here like just listening to mine. But
yeah. As in the workshop side, or which
I mean,
niche
all of
of the
it, because
community?
I mean, I see you. You know, again, I find it. When you were talking about like 20 million views on Reddit, I'm not sure if that was an exaggeration or the actual number.
Unfortunately, not.
Unfortunately not. But you know, it's like I've kind of always viewed, again, I use that kind of funnel perspective where it's like, you know, Reddit and Twitter, they're hard to monetize, so I more
Mm,
view them around kind of, you know, they're either kind of fun things that I just like hang out in as a hobbyist, or use it in order to kind of drive other platforms where I would actually kind of consider my core community to be, where it's like a walled garden sort of thing. So I always find it interesting to kind of like, there is an entirely different dynamic where the kind of platforms and the environments and ecosystems that I reside within primarily are ones where there is this kind of competition between entities that are actually, you know, there's a mix. There's certainly hobbyists, but the largest ones are, you know, they're not cutthroat, but they are precise with what they do and how they do it. Whereas that kind of incentive structure isn't there. So you have this much more, well, I'm hesitant to say like laissez-faire, but it's just an entirely different dynamic. And I feel like you are more um, steeped in and familiar with those dynamics than I
mm,
might be. So even things that might seem obvious to you, I would be extremely fascinated in hearing some of those kind of perspectives on kind of what creating content for specifically a Reddit audience or a Twitter audience might be like compared to our experiences on Twitch and YouTube.
mm, mm. I don't know, because I think the thing is, like you're saying, for me personally, my perspective is that I've done all this stuff pretty much as a hobby. Like, it's just fun for me to do. Like, since I was probably 10 years old, I'm 26 now. I've been making, random videos and bits of content, from Call of Duty, Halo, any, you know, games that have been going on for ages. And it's always been something I've just enjoyed, you know. But now I'm kind of seeing that, like, the amount of numbers that I'm getting on things like Twitter and Reddit, it's like, well, people are getting those numbers elsewhere, but they're making money doing that. So it's like,
Hmm.
I enjoy it as a hobby, definitely. Like you said, if you what was the saying? If you do what you love, or something like that. What was the
Yeah,
saying?
you'll never work a day in your life if you do what you love for your job.
Yeah, being
You'll never
absolute
work a day
bullshit.
in your.
No, that's totally true. Like, I started my career as a programmer, and I'm still doing programming. Um, but there's definitely a part of you dies when you do the thing that you previously did as a hobby. When you get paid to do it, and there's expectations on you, and you can no longer just jump in and do something fun. It's like, oh no, I have to get this thing done by next day, or blah blah blah. Um, and that's kind of where I am with content creation. I'm like, I could jump in, and I could, do what you guys are doing. Hopefully, at some point, if I really push myself to do it. Um, but also, it's a shitload of work too, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not sure I could justify that if I wasn't making anything out of it. But it's also like, I am getting those numbers. It's just on the wrong platforms. Um, I don't know. When it comes to Reddit, I think I don't think there's anything magical about it. I think it's the same as any other platform. Obviously, like, the content is way shorter. You know, like there's no like at least on the Overwatch side of Reddit, like nobody watches long form content there. You know, like there is no long form content posted to Reddit really, and even like YouTube stuff does well in the competitive Overwatch Reddit, but you literally cannot get a YouTube video to succeed on the or Overwatch Reddit. Like, there's nothing that will succeed there if it's posted on YouTube, unless it's something like Jeff is speaking to the subreddit specifically or something. Even like the patch notes and all that sort of stuff fails. You know what I call fails on the subreddit. Um, I don't know. I'm curious what kind of insights you expect me to have because it's really like I don't view it as that complicated. I guess I never really think about it because I'm just doing it as like a hobbyist. Like I'm not analyzing it. I'm just like, hey, I want to make some weird meme. I kind of have this idea of what I know is popular. I know how to format things in a way that people will click on it, you know, and then enjoy it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know what specific to
All right.
Reddit or
Well,
Twitter there is.
I won't push then, but I feel like even just saying that, even if you haven't put it to words, there's probably some things that you just know or do instinctively, or just have kind of like learned but not put words to. That
Hmm.
I think that it's like if other people had the ability to get as many views and popular threads on Reddit as you do, seemingly naturally, I
Hmm.
assure you, other people would be doing it.
Right.
Like so.
Well,
Just
I'll
give
say
yourself
that.
more credit, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll say the biggest piece of advice is when you post a Reddit thread, there's a little thing below it that says disable inbox replies. Turn that on and then don't read the comments because you will lose your soul if you read the comments on a Reddit thread. Like
Coming from
it's
somebody
not worth
Well,
who
it.
rewatches their Twitch VODs to chat and read every single YouTube comment. Oh, don't worry. That is a soul eroding process.
But yeah, like
well,
I
that's
mean,
yeah.
the thing is, every individual person making a comment, that individual is not having like they're not thinking about the impact they have on the person that has posted it. Uh, but when you see like 1,000 of those comments and like say they skew negative or even if they skew positive, I think it's kind of still not super healthy for you to rely on something like the internet for positive feedback. You know, there is a
Yeah.
degree of doing it, but you need to like separate yourself a bit and not rely on it super
One of
heavily.
the words that I learned
Mm,
2 days ago, I love learning new words, was hormesis,
mm,
where it's like the presence of a toxin in small measures or small amounts is actually beneficial. Where it's like if you were not subjected to any poisons or toxins, it would like you know like it doesn't provide any kind of like it doesn't make
Immune
you
system.
better.
Antibody or
Immune
Yeah.
system.
mm.
Whereas if you have too much toxin, well,
You die.
it's actively harmful. So I think that applies to reading comment, or just like one of the things, because again, my fiance is trying to become a writer.
Mm.
She wants to be a fiction writer, and she's getting ready to start posting chapters from her manuscript online. And I've been trying. Like, I'm really worried about her because it's like when you do look at a large number of unfiltered comments from the public, it's kind of like staring into the reactor core.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It's
It's absolutely
awful.
terrifying.
Holy shit, is it awful? It's like when again, I think I talked about this years ago, but like at the first point I started getting death threats, the first couple shocked me, and now it's just like I'm just confused at the sheer number
Yeah.
of people who will just resort to death threats seemingly on a whim, and it's like what the it's confusing at this. It was shocking at first, but now it's still just confusing to me, and you get people who are just every single possible spectrum of personality and emotion. It's weird. You really can't handle a lot of it, no matter how thick your skin is.
Yeah, that's why I tried to
Yeah.
just turn off and not engage with that sort of stuff because it will just get to you, you know. And like it's crazy. Even me, who I don't consider myself as like a large content creator, obviously on Reddit and doing fairly well, but like I'd get, people send me horrible messages and DMs and stuff, and it's like, why? Like, why the fuck would anyone? Sorry, why would anyone do that? You know?
Yeah.
I but that's why I just think just turn off and my advice is for anyone that wants to get into content creation is just turn off and don't engage with that sort of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
like I think that the benefits of the positives are outweighed by the negatives, but that's just me. You know, like I think other people might have a different opinion on that sort of stuff. So
Frida, would you
I
have
share the
anything
same
to add? Sorry,
opinion.
never mind.
I would say the problem that I find is that because I actively want to know what the current player base is like, feeling, thinks. So
hmm,
I do find it useful to read them, but I do share the same opinion where
Yeah.
it is handled with care. Put it that way. It is like carrying. You know how they got those pincers for like explosive material or
Oh yeah,
or
the
nuclear
radioactive
reactor.
stuff.
It's like that, where it's radioactive. That's that. Yeah, you got to be really careful with it. So, I mean, I have many account muted on both YouTube and Twitter.
Yeah.
Probably thousands, maybe. I don't know. The mute button is amazing on both those platforms because it allows them to still do the thing they want anyway. Because the reason I don't block is because or try not to block is because it's like you're singling them out and like it's in like an FU. Whereas mute is like, I just don't want to read what you have to say because that's the thing I hate about social media is that it has none of the workings of actual communication. It is pantomiming as actual communication, but it's all nonsense pretty much for the most part because you can never get across what you actually mean. None of the like emotions in your face get shown, so you know what tone the person was speaking in, or they're being sarcastic for real, they're just trolling. They're 14 and they would never even talk to you in real life, yet they have the courage to say, horrible things to Jayne or whatever. Like it's the internet needs a way to, like, in the advanced AI version of the internet, eventually we'll be able to filter these things so you can just when a stupid comment comes up, you can see it's from a 9-year-old, and you're like you wouldn't get upset if a 9-year-old said, like, "Oh, come on, you little moron! Like, get on there. Where's your mom?" You know what I mean? Like, you would react totally differently. But
one of the insane things too is like a lot of times, I mean, early on when I tried to kind of understand where some of these comments were coming from, I'd like interact with them or confront them. It's like,
that's the worst. Yeah.
But it's like every single, almost like I would say 95% of those people would be like, "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm a huge fan, dude. Love what you do." I'm like, "What? How can you 180 like that?"
That's one thing I've noticed about all the, like, when people comment on something famous, it's like the 180 when that famous person acknowledges you is absolutely hilarious, because it's always like, "You're absolutely shit," and then that person's like, "Hey, what's up, buddy?" And they're like, "Oh my god, it's Jayne! Oh shit, it's Jayne!
Yeah.
Jayne, what's up, man? I love
It's absurd. God, it fucking drives me bonkers. But
I think that just kind of illustrates the point, though, is that people don't. If people just say stuff and they don't really think about it.
And I think that there's a couple things that we could go on. We talked about, because one of the comments in chat, who was it? It was Spire, said, "So don't listen to the consumer." I think that this goes back to, you have to remember one of the things that we were talking about.
Consumer, by the way. Like,
yeah, well, for you, yes. But we were talking about it where somewhere between like 1% and 5% of the people who comment make up the actual audience, and I think that if you only listen to the people who are loudest, you're going to be constantly led astray, and you can never make people happy. And the people might find something mad, but if you're kind of always making those changes for the people who don't like what they're seeing, then the people who do like what they're seeing and are just like, because most people will comment when they don't like something. If they do like something, they'll be like, "I like that," and they just move on. It's one of the reasons why in content creation the age-old saying is enragement is engagement, because if you make somebody angry, they're going to engage with you, and then they're going to try and engage with other people so that they can get their feelings validated, because it is a very comforting thing to be angry in a group. So you're constantly like the primary feedback that you get is from a minority, and a minority that doesn't like what you're making. And I think that can be a very, very insidious trap for content creators, where I am also of the opinion that basically your audience will develop around any kind of content you want. I mean, there's 7 billion people out there on the planet, and obviously that's an exaggeration, and this is a generalization as a whole, but even like 0.01% of people like what you're making, there's an audience for it somewhere. It's a different thing actually trying to attract that audience and inform them that content made for them exists here. But I think that you can find an audience for basically any kind of content, and that's an extension of my belief that you can make almost anything entertaining. Where am I going with this? I have no idea. Oh, don't listen to your. Oh, it's like, so you don't listen to your audience, right? It's like, it's
like
because the vocal part is only one part of your audience.
In fact, they might never be your audience, because they might never be interested in watching any of your content anyways. They just wanted to chime in and say you suck.
Yeah.
And also, I think what you need to realize about communication is that people aren't actually good at expressing how they feel or even knowing what they want. Like Apple doesn't listen to their audience explicitly. They don't like go out, listen to advice, and then get it. No, they engineer it from the back end, right? Like they put that effort in. It's the same reason why Blizzard doesn't do every balance change that anybody asks for, because you don't always know the effects that it's going to have anyway, or like them when you get them. So it's more complicated than that. You can't just explicitly do the thing people's asking, because that's assuming that they know all of the results, and nobody does. So instead, you have to try to do it from different data sources. So listening to the audience might be like, audience retention on a video. That's the easiest one to look at. If people watching, good. Like that's a good first step.
And this also runs into a problem which we can tie back into around like narrative collapse and reification, where we were kind of saying that, people saying that the community share of the game is bad, that can kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy, where I don't want to get too political, but it's one of the easiest ones that's very, very recent is kind of like, the saying defund the police, right? It was the saying was not meant to literally like defund the police, or maybe some people do think that was a literal saying about it. But, if it's very easy for people to kind of comment and identify things that they have the name for. This is the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Chat will correct me if I'm wrong. Where it's like if you pointed out about like a yellow specific kind of car, or you start to learn about what maybe like a Camry is, then you'll start spotting more Camrys when you're out on the road. But when somebody has the term for something, they will just identify it more because humans are really good at pattern matching in general. So when people don't have the word for something, they won't really know how to identify it. And if they are given a word, they will see that pattern everywhere. So you can have these kind of persisting narratives, which are still divorced from reality, because not only do they have words to properly critique or comment on your content or properly describe what it is that they like about content, but in that void, they have been given something. And in the absence of any other belief, they adopt that one. That's like 7 layers deep, but hopefully people got it.
We should be charging for these college level courses Jayne's been giving on different philosophies and theories. I'm enjoying it.
Free money, guys. Free money. Money is power. This is free.
Next on Skillshare. That's what I've been doing after Overwatch 2. Skillshare.
Yes. So it's a combination of the Bader-Meinhof and Sapir. So it's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is when you have a word for something, basically you think that it happens more often. And then it's also the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is that people's observations are based off of the native speaker's perception and like categorization and labeling of their experience through language.
Yeah. I can't necessarily actively add on that because that's not something I'm learning right now. But what I want to kind of chime in with is more of a philosophical gripe, which is I think that like not everyone's opinion is actually valid. And I know that's kind of a 5-head statement, like, of course, but I think as content creators, you can end up consumed by, well, I suppose the imposter syndrome and just general self-doubt of like, maybe they are all right. Maybe I do suck. Yeah. And that tendency to like always gravitate towards like everybody who's pointing something out, maybe they're valid. Maybe there's a right reason for it. And I think even culturally, we're kind of shifting towards that belief system where, the idea of fake news goes back to that whole idea of like, well, if I believe something, it's real, it's valid. And we kind of are in a sphere of like acknowledging every opinion as a valid, as a right opinion. Like just because that guy said something, it must like there must be some meaning to it. They've said it for a reason. They believe it for a reason. But I think you do have to develop a thick skin as a content creator. And just generally, I would advise for whatever I can
think
advise.
That like I think that this hits a little bit harder for me, and I've had to put so much effort into this because like it's part of being bipolar is that when I'm on like the more manic side, I really, really struggle with filtering out like people's opinions, and just like social spaces are very difficult for me to deal with in a healthy manner. But like two of the kind of pieces or like pieces of advice that I kind of like really, really helped me deal with it was basically that, don't take criticism from anybody who you wouldn't ask for advice. And then one of the other ones, just kind of like as a tool to try and understand why people might do such toxic and hurtful things in a public space. It's the saying is that like hurt people hurt people. So somebody who has been hurt, it hurts other people to try and understand it, or it's a coping mechanism basically. A bit of a sidebar, but
no, I think it is relevant because I think a lot of people do struggle with it. Like just for example, like I posted a video the other day from one of the events that I hosted. And one of the participants was, in the comments, kind of reading every single one of the comments about themselves, and some of the comments were hateful and transphobic actually towards the person. And they kind of came back to me and you were like, "Could you please delete them?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I'll delete the transphobic comments." But like some of the other comments were just generally about the gameplay, and this person was like trying to, like, well, I know I did that, but like I'm now better. I'm like higher SR now than when this video was first recorded. And I was like, let me just give you my advice from my end is just stop reading the comments, because you don't need to prove anything to anyone else, basically, right? That's always I think the human desire is to prove something to someone else. Like, no, I am right. Like, I did this for a reason. Or if they said it, then, I have to show them that I'm actually good. But yeah, again, it's tough because it's the absolute polar opposite of the other human instinct, which is the need for validation and the need to have other people acknowledge that what we're doing is correct and somehow worthwhile. But at the same time, you also, like you said, Jayne, I think that phrase is a good one. Like, don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from.
Yeah.
So just because some random dude said something doesn't mean it's.
Yeah, and there's lots of, I guess this is probably something that I have unique experience with. Like, Freedo, what was the, not to flex or anything, but what was the most amount of viewers you had when you were on Twitch?
Maybe 1,000 concurrent or a few if we were the only ones basically on. But this is like 2017, I think. So
Yeah.
The number might seem high now. It wasn't very high then.
But yeah, what I'm trying to say is, like, at some point you deal with these kind of coping mechanisms of being able to tolerate, having a couple thousand people in your Twitch chat. And one of the things that happens on my program a lot is I will have guests on, or kind of like do impromptu things where, I remember one specific review that I did with Brigitte and a streamer by the name of Slayergrams. But Slayergrams normally had about 100 viewers. And then, putting him in the review where he was a streamer, so he was used to reading chat, but kind of reading chat when there were like 4,000 people, and he had a very unique play style around Brigitte, which chat wasn't initially buying into. Like, it did kind of become a war, and chat, and with almost my encouragement, which I kind of regret looking back, even though it was a hilarious and very funny review, you almost kind of like toyed with him. For people who didn't have kind of these coping mechanisms, defenses, or immune system, basically, to the unfiltered mass of comments, it can really kind of distort a person quite badly. You have, it's like, when I was doing my stream, when I was on the launcher, I had like 12,000 viewers for something like that. And then one of the aspects, somebody submitted a Zarya clip for me to review, and I wanted to do more, but they didn't have another Zarya game. So I, in order to make things entertaining and keep things going, I asked them to turn their stream on and play a game as Zarya. So this person who maybe would have streamed to like 1 or 2 viewers suddenly had to deal with 4,000 people and myself watching them. And they very nearly had a panic attack during it. It was, I was meant for it to be all in fun, but it is really kind of, those kind of segments are at the expense, or at the very least, the unfamiliarity of people dealing with large amounts of perspectives on them. And, it's one of the reasons that becomes difficult. Has to do, I'm going to keep throwing concepts out, this one being Dunbar's number and context collapse, is that humans really struggle to cope with trying to retain more than about 150 social connections at one time. Obviously, in a person's life,
that's the max, actually, I believe.
That's
right?
the max, right?
Right. That's the max you even can handle at all.
Yeah,
basically.
But that's handle in all aspects of your life. So if you have if you are a very social person outside of it, you can handle maybe like 50 or 60 additional social contexts that your brain can handle. But if you view chat as a collection of individuals, it's way beyond what your brain can handle, and it's stressful. It causes anxiety. It causes you to shut down. It's like, one of the ways that most content creators at the large scale is they stop viewing chat as a group of individuals, and it's like this collective, or it's an amorphous blob, where if you do certain specific things, it affects that blob in quantifiable percentages, whether viewership decreases, revenue increases, any of these things, and you stop viewing the audience as individuals and you view it as a singular entity. And I think that that's one of the ways that creators, once they get beyond a certain threshold of popularity, really have to adapt to. And it's something that I've struggled with, because I really do enjoy working with individuals, and I enjoy that more intimate connection. And like, once my viewership did get to the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 viewer mark, I really felt like I'd lost that. But yeah, that's another just kind of rant. So
it's kind of personified, or not even personified, but just shown by the nature of how chat changes. Like, a chat goes from you reading the comments to just being an emote spam, right? Like, the big streamers, that's what it is. Like, or when you're watching Overwatch League or whatever, it's just like the emote being spam changes to kind of showcase that the hive mind has switched to this emotion, but that actual individual of like what this person said disappears. Like, oh hey, whatchamacallit, how you doing? Like, oh, you had a bad day today? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Or like, that just becomes pog spam. Chat, Can we get a Keck W?
This is so sad. Can we get 5 gifted?
Exactly. Okay. Well, Overwatch 2, right? Am I right?
You're right.
Okay, so we have been going on for a while, and as in entertaining this is, obviously, like I said, I am conscious of taking your guys' time. Since we've been speaking about volunteer economics and all that, I'm here profiting off your guys' time, so I won't exploit
You're
that.
goddamn right.
You better
I
remember that,
expect
yeah.
my cut.
Well, it won't be a large one. It won't be a large one, I promise you.
My secretary sent you the bill for the speaking fee, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
You got that.
And for the free advice lectures that we gave. And I need to pay Jeff Kaplan, who popped in while I was DC'd for a while. That's another thing I need to remember.
Yeah.
But
And I have completely scuffed this podcast by having my Discord crash like 5 times during it.
It's okay.
Probably hasn't crashed once in the last 5 months, but it's like, you know what? SVB's podcast, heck it.
Let's go. It's because you were. It was funniest when you disconnected when you were about to be like, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this. Boom, and you're off. And it
Really?
was
That's what I cut off? That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
good stuff.
just like a sentence.
Chat will never see that insight, and I get to keep my job. PogChamp.
Exactly, the best of both worlds. But in concluding thoughts, let's head over then to So what do we let's say what we're hoping from Overwatch 2 and from a content creator's perspective, since that's what we've been focusing on, and just like what you personally would like to do with Overwatch 2 as well.
So there's so many avenues that I'm excited for. One, I think, as I've said 5 times in this show, I think already, a viable competitive product on multiple levels for the average level players that aren't pros in Overwatch League. Tournaments and stuff, hopefully would do that. Like in the same way Destiny has trials. People get excited to watch streams for that. I think the same thing, watching your favorite streamer teams go against each other and community members on a set day. I think that's how Overwatch needs to be consumed. Whereas right now, the ranked product is just this like amorphous blob of intermittent queue times, and sometimes good players are on, and other times you're dealing with just the dross of nonsense. So therefore, like, it just utterly degrades the product of it on so many levels, either on the consumer or the producer of a stream for it. So there's that. I hope they address that in a serious way. I am also interested in the depths of PvE. Andy was asking if I would do like Let's Play type stuff. Not sure about that, but for sure, like there may be builds or routes or strategies or who knows what level they want to go with it. If you look to like Diablo 3 and all these Diablos really, but there's different build paths, and who knows how much depth they want to go with that. So I expect some level with that, and then who knows what else they have in store. Maybe despite only one dev on the workshop, maybe it gets a bit of a buff as well, and then we do get community PvE missions, and then that's a whole nother sector. Like, who knows what level Activision Blizzard is coming at Overwatch 2 with. I've been of the belief that they have severely underpromised on purpose in order to overperform expectations, because what we've seen so far is rather unimpressive, and I think they'd be crazy not to know that, or they're out of touch. I mean, that's totally possible too. I mean, there's enough memes to show that that's possible. What, you guys don't have phones? Like, there's so many ways that they have proven that they're capable of being out of touch. But my assumption is that we've seen a glimpse of the game so far, and who knows how many like a lot's riding on it, right? Like, there's Overwatch League riding on it. There's the franchise as a whole riding on it. So I think they have a lot at stake to make a big jump forward, and hopefully then we can, on the content side of things, we can see a nice array of content start to flourish again with a wide span. Whereas right now, I feel like the scope of successful content is just so narrow, where we have a few personalities that are good at making fun ranked videos or whatever. That's like a known quantity. There's the SVBs and your Overwatches of the world, and what else? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if I could say another thing. And hopefully that's not the case with Overwatch 2. And because early days of Overwatch was really exciting. Like, there's just content popping up all over the place, things going on, new ways to approach the game and talk about it and discuss it. And so I look forward to that with Overwatch 2.
Yeah. Andy, how about you next?
Yeah, I was thinking about it there, and one of the things not necessarily related to workshop is the Irish Overwatch side of things. Is that, like, Overwatch 2 is going to bring a lot of new people into Overwatch. And for me, as like a kind of like event organizer, community builder for Irish Overwatch, it's going to mean like we'll actually have kind of a boost in the lifeblood, that whole stuff, because it's so hard to organize those things in a country where, you know, I'll throw back to our first one that we did. We managed to we managed to get a corner of a pub with a like 25-inch TV with no sound while there was a football match going on, and that's what we got for our first Overwatch League viewing party. And it was maybe like 10 people. So like I'm looking forward to the kind of like the just lifeblood that it's going to inject into like the whole Overwatch ecosystem, and especially around new people getting into being a part of the community that I'm building personally. And then of course like the workshop, like shout outs to Zach Metcalf, Magsy, the workshop developer. That guy works so hard on the workshop, and like he has so much passion. I really hope that they do more at the workshop, but even not going as far as that, I hope his hard work gets rewarded, and he sees the sort of gains or whatever, give the man a raise. I hope he gets something out of all the hard work he's put in, because man, like the workshop is so good already, and it's all most of it is off of his hard work and his sweat. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of well, one, I'm looking forward to a new like Torbjorn style character to make memes about. Like, I want somebody who like Torbjorn is kind of like he's like a body, he has arms, he has legs. I want somebody who is even more Torbjorn like, in that he's just like a head. Just his entire body
Like
is a
the
head.
face of Bo or something from
Yeah,
Doctor Who.
exactly. I can just roll him around, something like that. But yeah, no, like I think workshop and this sort of like lifeblood it's going to inject into everything is what I'm looking forward to. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just big shout out to Zach one time, because I think like
absolutely.
just even that one chat where I had like so much passion for the game, like just I cannot imagine having that kind of passion while developing the game as well. We kind of spoke about how when you love something, it kind of drains your soul if you do it for a job, and I cannot imagine how Zach keeps up the absolute love and enthusiasm he has for the game. So shout out to him. But Jayne, over to you.
I mean, I think that I definitely think that the community currently is as strong as it is, partially because we are expectant about Overwatch 2's return, and I hope that that kind of interest is something that is able to be captured. It isn't just like a flash in the pan or something like that. So not only do I think that it's an opportunity for the current content creators to more establish themselves and maybe provide the opportunity for some current content creators who are on the level of hobbyists or amateurs, even though that kind of has an insulting connotation to it, to actually make the jump into full time. Which over time, if somebody is, in the same way that Freedo was talking about it, if somebody is full time and working on it and iterating on it, they will just improve over time, and it will help with the long term health. But I'm also hoping that that renewed interest can develop some communities to actually turn public facing so that they can attract and grow, whether it is kind of, especially on the more casual side with art, lore, any of those side of things as well. And I'm really hoping that along with Overwatch 2, we get sort of features that allow for these kind of emergent communities and content creation opportunities. I think that the replay feature and the workshops have been great, but if we do have weekend tournaments, if we do have the top 500 games on the main menu, there's another one that I'm missing, which would be a really good one. It's like if they change their monetization model, where instead of pay to play, it's free to play with like a battle pass system or microtransactions, hopefully tasteful microtransactions, or even just little things to really energize the content creator community, like creator codes. I mean, you do that, like that alone increases the amount of available quote unquote content creator positions and just makes the community healthier.
Yeah, hard agree with pretty much all of those things. And I think like what I've wanted from Overwatch 2 has kind of changed over time many times. Or sometimes I'm like, I want bans. Sometimes I'm like, I want this. I want more heroes. I want that. But I think the more I think about it from a larger perspective, the more I kind of want Overwatch 2 to be a sort of seminal moment where Blizzard changes up the way they've been approaching Overwatch. Because for the last 18 months, we've put up with silence in favor of Overwatch 2. But it can't happen again. Like, it can't be like we drop Overwatch 2 and then it's like 4 months or 5 months and it's like one developer update and like vague promises of something coming. It needs to be like, I think from the drop of Overwatch 2, it needs to be like, okay, we understood what we were doing wrong with Overwatch 1. Okay, here's Overwatch 2, okay, in every, like, for example, like, it doesn't have to be exactly like the Valorant system, but, in X amount of months, something is going to drop in this space, or like a new map, a new hero, a new something. Because I think that is what really drives hype out of the community. Right now, as we've kind of alluded to, a lot of people are staying in belief, almost for this deity that never appears itself in the form of Overwatch 2. But the longer that keeps going, like, that can only happen one time. Like, one time Jesus will appear and we'll be like, praise. But if it goes like another, 2,000 years and nobody sees him, we're going to have a lot of doubters. So that's my metaphor. I think we just need, even, particularly from a content creator perspective, like, it will just help, I think. When content creators are energized, the community is energized, more people play, and the game thrives. So that's what I'd like.
It's just harder now. I think back to Overwatch 1 coming out, and the landscape so badly needed a game like that. You think back then, the battle royale genre wasn't even named that. Like, it was like DayZ or something. I can't remember, but like, Fortnite wasn't out yet, and so there's so much more competition, I feel, in this space. So I don't think it's going to be as easy for Overwatch to reclaim all of the hype that it had the first time go, but I think there will be a lot of players that are interested, especially if it goes free to play, right? That'll be interested in tuning back in to see, okay, how are you handling things this time? And it's important to make that first impression strong, because if we start getting into the same habits where, I talked about the Tim the Tatman fall off, it's like, why would he continue to drudge through Overwatch if he just doesn't even enjoy it? Like, aside from all of the monetary reasons that going to another game would be good, like, if you can't even just keep the enjoyment of a streamer, then how are you going to expect to get any of the other stuff? So my hope and prayer is that aspect, and the reason I use him is because I feel like he's a good archetype of a typical gamer. Obviously, he's like an amazing streamer that I look up to, but he also he's a down to earth guy. Like, he's not, whereas my enjoyment of the game, I don't necessarily think translates to all players, right? Because I'm such a nerd. Whereas someone who's like more active in just playing, like, I almost get as much enjoyment of discussing it as I do playing it, and probably more actually now. But yeah, so that's kind of my point. Like holding on to their attention. Like, we can't have it launch and then people have expectations for it, and then they keep running into a brick wall of whatever problem it is. Like, the format of it has to make sense and be a contained entity without, like, pleasure. I was going to say a phrase that I'm glad I didn't come out of my mouth. Without enjoyment, like, seeping out of the edges. We're not going to finish this sentence, but you know what I mean. Without being like drains on your ability to enjoy the game, essentially. Like, you shouldn't have to jump through 6 hoops and hurdles in order to get your enjoyment out, which is what I feel you have to do with Overwatch. Like, I feel like I have to teach people to enjoy or how to enjoy the game. How do you not lose your sanity while playing ranked? Like, top 10 tips. Like, that should not be. Like, and I've done videos similar to that and how to change your mentality, but like, the fact that I need to do that is a problem, and like, that's what I'm looking forward to hopefully being addressed in some capacity, where there's an outlet for us to properly grind and enjoy the game. Just let us enjoy it. Like, just stop putting all these things in the way that ruin it when we actually just want to love it. So that's my story. I'm sticking.
I like the idea of Tim the litmus test there. I think it's a good kind of just have people enjoying the game. That would be nice.
I feel around when he left is when, like, more mainstream players were starting to step back, where it's like, how many times am I going to queue up for this nonsense, and realize that I'm not actually having fun with this. Like, why would I continue to do this despite loving the game? So being able to have something core that they can return to reliably without it just being a complete lottery, and whether you're going to have a good time or not, is pretty important to me. So
fair.
Here's to hope.
Anything? Yeah, no, I completely agree. Is there anything that any of the others wanted to kind of add on top of that before we hit the director clap?
I really enjoyed this episode. I was 4 hours flew by. Snap.
Honestly, for me, that was super informative, and like, I haven't learned the like you're saying, there's no one piece of advice that's gonna make you succeed. It's all hard work and it all takes time. But
hard work pays off.
Exactly. Oh, what? How did I not think of that? Oh my god!
You will once you're more experienced content creator.
Exactly.
Jayne and Freedo had even better ones, but I came with the mid-tier one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You get passed it down.
But yeah, thanks for having me on. Like, it was really good, really good.
I had fun as well.
I thank all of you for being on. Like, it was just genuinely was amazing. It felt like I was just chatting in my living room with some people, which is nice in Corona times. But just felt nice to talk shop and share ideas and learn a lot from you guys in particular. So thank you very much. I'm also glad that, like, chat seemed to enjoy it too. Like, it wasn't like people were like, this is about Overwatch, I'm out, or whatever. So I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for what an awesome conversation we had. And yeah, just let's keep chiming in together like this and keep up to date with each other. And God bless Overwatch
sure.
too.
Yep.
All right, guys. Peace out. Catch you later. Let me find somebody to raid. I'm gonna mute us and take us to the starting soon screen while we do that. So, peace out, guys.